I learned 2 important things on the night my husband mocked me across a restaurant table. First, marble floors carry laughter farther than you think. Second, if you count to 10 slowly enough, people will confess what they're afraid of, without realizing they've told you how to dismantle them. It was a Thursday, the kind of evening that makes downtown look like it practices success in the mirror. The rooftop bar had a view of glass towers reflecting other glass towers, like money complementing itself. James had a few people from work he wanted me to meet. He said it casually, like I was a +1 and not a person with a history, a skill set, a mind that had learned how to map complex systems while other people were still bragging about their calendar hacks. I'd taken a sabbatical the year before when my father got sick. I didn't talk about what I did much, partly because grief had sanded down my appetite for explaining things to people who think explanation is a hobby. I said vaguely, with things like tech and ops, and let their questions wash past. It became a habit, then a shield, letting other people narrate me to themselves while I counted to 10. At the table, James, his friends from the inner circle, Brad with the watch, Colin who hums when he lies, Derek just loud enough, and Nate who had the smile of a man who believes charming a maitre d' is a personality trait. They were already 1 cocktail into their confidence when I arrived. It started with a joke. It always does. "So," Brad said, waving his glass like it was auditioning for weather, "how's the job hunt? Any luck getting back into the game? Or are we still doing self-care?" He said self-care like he'd tasted it and found it insufficiently masculine. I smiled. The kind you can frame or throw away. "I'm between things," I said. "Family took priority." "Priority," Colin said, humming, because that's his tell when he thinks he's about to be smart. "That's what I call Tuesdays." He laughed at his own self, then checked James's face to make sure the laughter landed in the approved zone. James wanted to look embarrassed on my behalf, but had already committed to the bit. "She's picky," he told them, like a coach explaining a player sitting out. "Interviews, but nothing bites. I tell her there are plenty of team roles that pay well if you just show up. Not everyone needs to be a founder." "Careful," Derek stage whispered. "She might discover the secret that meetings are just adult show and tell." Nate leaned back and gave me that tilted smile men give when they want you to know they've voted on you in a competition you didn't enter. "What do you do when you're not applying?" "Pilates, plants, Pinterest." "Receipts," I said, and sipped my water. They heard sarcasm, not documentary. James laughed like he approved of the line. "She's got jokes," he said. "She collects notebooks like people collect regrets." He enjoyed the laugh. There's a particular expression men wear when they think. They've balanced the ledger by being unkind in public but technically clever. It's the look my father used to warn me about when I was 12 and thought charisma was a legally binding contract. "Watch the ones who make fun of your hunger," he'd said, stirring sugar into his tea. "They're telling you they're scared of being asked to share." So I counted, 1 to 10, slow enough that my breath came back to me instead of running ahead to pick fights. By dessert, the jokes had exhausted themselves, and the bill arrived with the elegant arrogance only linen can wear. Nate grabbed it theatrically, then let James sign while pretending to resist. Tiny habits, tiny hierarchies. You can learn an organization by watching who reaches for the pen and who pretends they don't want it. On the way down in the elevator, I stood slightly behind them and watched their reflections align and misalign in the mirrored walls. Brad said not quite softly enough, "I mean, if my wife took a whole year off, I'd make her go volunteer at the office just to keep her from getting Rusty. Colin hummed. Derek snorted. Nate pressed the lobby button like it owed him rent. "Good night," I said, when we hit the street. I kissed James on the cheek the way you kiss someone you intend to invoice. He asked if I wanted to share a ride home. "I'm going to walk," I said. "I need air." I walked 3 blocks, turned left into a building that doesn't look like it contains anything as interesting as it does, and took the service elevator to the floor without a lobby. The badge reader blinked green. Inside, a long hallway with the kind of carpet that forgives everything, a door with no name, and a piece of tape where a name could go if anyone here needed their ego fed by signage. I knocked. 2 beats, then 1, and Sarah opened. She wore black pants, a sweater the color of legal pads, and the expression of a woman who has said no politely all day and found herself invigorated by it. "Evening, boss," she said, not list, loudly. We have never liked loud. "How do you like my husband's friends?" I asked. "I like our protocols better," she said, and let me in. The room was all logic, whiteboard wall, 6 workstations, 1 big table, a coffee machine that believes in itself. On the table, a thick folder labeled with the future in block letters. On the wall, a printout of a calendar with tomorrow's morning circled. Underneath, Sarah had written in black marker, "Angela, 9 a.m. Angela is the name I use when I want to be underestimated. There are names that announce themselves and names that slip in and do their job. Angela slips. "Everything ready?" I asked. Sarah tapped the folder. 2 phones. One with a recording app your grandmother could use, one clean. Passes printed. The candidate resume, the humble one. She slid me a paper. Angela Summers, operations assistant. 2 years at a non-profit, sabbatical for family care. Nothing about what I've built twice already. Nothing about the patents. Nothing about, not the things that make men Google you. "This still feels like theater," I said. "It is," Sarah said, "but it's also collection. You want receipts. We gather them with charm and folders. I wanted to be kinder than I felt toward James, toward Brad and Colin and Derek and Nate, and their ecosystem of banter that cloaked predation in collegiality. But this wasn't about punishment. It was about alignment, getting the right people in the right rooms and the wrong people out of the rooms where they could injure other people's futures. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., I said, looking at the calendar. "As Angela. 1 interview. Then the board at 11. Then we write this like a procedure instead of a revenge fantasy." Sarah smiled with her eyes the way women do when they've stapled a monster to the floor without ruining the rug. "We'll need coffee," she said, "and the good pens." "Bring both," I said, "and a stopwatch." She raised an eyebrow. "We timing the fall?" "No," I said. "We're timing ourselves." Discipline looks good on camera. I walked home, the city doing its soft midnight hum, and tried not to narrate the next day to myself like a movie. Movies lie about timing. They cut the boring bits, and the boring bits are where integrity lives. I slept for 5 hours, woke at 5, made oatmeal with 1 coin of banana on top the way my father taught me when he wanted me to stop shaking before a piano recital, and dressed like a person who hopes she'll be seen as helpful. At 8:12 a.m., Angela Summers tied her hair back with a plain elastic. At 8:37, she sat in a lobby that smells like glass, pretending to be peppermint. At 8:58, she followed a receptionist with eyebrows like sentences to a conference room with a diagram of growth on the wall that looked like someone had drawn a staircase and lied to themselves about geometry. At 9:03 the door opened, and in came the inner circle. Brad with the watch, Colin with the hum, Derek just loud enough, and Nate with the smile. James would. Join later, the receptionist said. I wrote that down in my head with a pencil. People who arrive last like to pretend they are the sun. Angela, Brad said, taking the head chair without looking to see if it was his. Thanks for coming. We like to keep these casual. Think of it as a conversation. Conversations are where predators do their best work. I smiled like a person who believes in conversations. Then I opened my folder, pressed record on the phone designed for grandmothers, and asked them how they solve problems that involve other people's money. Brad did the introductions like a man flipping business cards in a magic trick. He said their titles quickly, as if speed turned nouns into rank. VP Sales, Acting COO, Strategy Lead, Head of People. He saved Head of People for Nate, which made me want to ask which people and how many of them knew they had a head. I smiled as Angela would, eager but contained, and folded my hands on the table over the humble resume Sarah had printed on beige paper, because beige makes men comfortable. We're scaling, Brad began, tapping his watch as if growth came out of the bezel. We need hustlers. We don't overthink culture here. We hire killers. Can you kill? Colin hummed. Derek laughed. Nate adjusted his cuff. Interviews tell you everything if you let silence do some of the work. I tilted my head, like a sparrow considering bread. I'm good at finishing, I said. I like lists with boxes. Nate smiled at the word boxes, because Nate is the kind of man who believes systems are cages women willingly enter. Tell us about a time you owned something,
he said gently, the way you talk to a child you think might be upset by thunder. I resisted the urge to tell him about the time I owned a cap table. At the nonprofit, I said, I inherited an event with a blown budget. We cut signage, negotiated the venue, moved catering to a local vendor, and called it community engagement. We finished under by 9%. Derek stifled a yawn. Cute, he said. Tell me about quotas. Can you push a team? I can count, I said. Counting changes behavior. Brad finally looked at my resume. You took a year off, he said, the way people say cancer in a whisper. That makes me nervous. Gaps do. I took care of a parent, I said. He was more interesting than any product roadmap I've seen in years. Colin hummed, because empathy makes him sweat. They tried to triangulate me with jargon. How do you feel about OKRs? What's your take on zero-based budgeting? Would you be willing to sign an NDA
today? We move fast. Nate slid a stapled document across the table, 7 pages, downloaded from a template farm, names unfilled. Angela read page 1 and looked worried. I read the footer and almost laughed. They hadn't even changed the demo watermark. I slid it back gently. Happy to sign when an offer is on the table, I said. I keep promises. I don't collect souvenirs. Derek leaned forward. We do test projects, he said. Unpaid. Weekend grind. Ship us a deck by Monday, we'll see if you keep up. Unpaid work is illegal in our state unless it's a true volunteer role, I said softly, like I'd mistaken him for someone who preferred not breaking the law on Thursdays. But I can show you a teardown of your onboarding flow with public screenshots. Brad's mouth twitched. The watch ticked. Somewhere in the wall, a duct exhaled. Colin reached for a pitcher of water, then thought better of it. He doesn't like to pour for other people on camera. Nate smiled again, the head of people hoot. Hinks smiling compensates for policy. Culture is big for us, he lied. We have a bowling team. We do Whiskey Wednesdays. No divas. We're a family. Families don't make each other sign NDAs in lobbies, I said in my head. Angela nodded. That sounds lively. The door opened with a remembered flourish. James. Late, but still pretending the clock likes him. He took in the room, saw me, did that tiny double take men do when they realize the universe has arranged symmetry in their presence. He covered it with a grin. Oh, hey, he said, like surprise was flattery. They told me we had a candidate. I didn't know it was you. He kissed the air near my face like a man awarding points. Guys, this is my wife. She's shopping the market. He sat, uninvited, at the end of the table, angled just right for a hierarchy selfie. Angela, Brad corrected, glancing at the resume. Operations assistant. Right, James said, winking. Angela. She makes a mean spreadsheet. Colin hummed. Derek drummed, his fingers. Nate rolled his pen along the seam of the table like a boy worrying a scab. I watched James take the headspace with the ease of someone who's been handed chairs his whole life. Brad picked up the thread. Walk us through a dashboard you built, he said. Time box it. 1 minute. Use your words, I did. I sketched a simple intake tracker on the whiteboard. Columns for request, owner, due date, stuck reason. I used thin lines. I left room for a name. I circled stuck reason and watched Derek flinch. We don't dwell on stuck, he said. We celebrate ship. Stuck tells the truth faster, I said. Colin hummed in a minor key. James leaned back and laced his fingers behind his head, the picture of a man relaxed by other people's labor. Do you cry at work? He asked, like he was joking and also daring me. Only in meetings where someone says we're a family, I said in my head. Angela smiled with mouth closed. I write it down first. Then if it's still crying, it's useful. Number. He clasped his hands. Okay, he said, voice brightening, signaling the we're good guys portion of the programming. We run a tight ship. We've had to make hard calls. We appreciate loyalty. We don't love turnover. Sarah once told me that when people say we don't love turnover, what they mean is we fire quietly and expect silence louder than applause. I tilted my head. How does the company define loyalty? I asked. Derek grinned. Not suing, he said, then pretended he'd made a joke when he saw Brad's face. James changed the subject, quick as a cat. Let's do the tough talk round, he said. Angela, what would you do if you found someone was, he glanced at Derek, padding numbers? Count with them, I said, then count without them. Colin hummed in a higher register, which means danger is in earshot. We're being very open here, he said, signaling a pivot to confidences. We keep this in the room. The phone in my bag, the one for grandmothers, kept its red light steady. Ass. And Gayla nodded solemnly. I glanced at the glass wall. The lobby outside moved like an aquarium. Whoever designed this floor loved transparency but not accountability. It's a common corporate kink. Brad leaned forward. Hypothetical, he said. Say you know about a big partnership before the market does. You sell a little. It's savvy. You keep the lights on for your family. You're a hero at home. But the compliance people... He made a dismissive motion. They write memos for sport. Hypotheticals are useful for ethics, I said. They're also useful for indictments. James exhaled a laugh. She's sharp, he told the room, like he's been training me. But she's also soft-hearted. She'll make sure your calendar is hydrated, Nate grinned, relieved to be back in a world where jokes don't involve handcuffs. What do you need from us to be successful? He asked, proud of the question because someone on LinkedIn told him to ask it. A budget that's real, I said. Authority that matches the RE. Responsibility. Names on the documents. And a copy of the org chart that tells the truth. Derek said, org charts are aspirational. Colin hummed the sound organists play at funerals between hymns. Brad checked his watch. Okay, he said, we're going to move to the practical. Weekend test. We'll send you a bundle of our onboarding flows, just public screens, and you'll write a plan, 5 pages max. If we like it, we'll talk comp. What's comp? I asked. Fair, Brad said, which means less than I'd pay a good barista. Nate slid the template NDA toward me again, this time with a pen that expects gratitude. Just to get you into our docs, he said. I let Angela's face do a small, impressed O. Docs already? I said. Wow. James looked pleased with his friends, and with himself for owning them, and with the building for reflecting his pleasure back to him in triplicate. We like to move, he said. No moss. Where do people move when they say no? I asked, and watched Nate blink. He does. Didn't have a slide for that. Brad stood. Interview posture. We'll be in touch, he said, which is HR for go away until I decide you are interesting again. May I use the restroom before I go? I asked. Long train ride. Down the hall left, Nate said. Badge won't get you back in, but reception can buzz. Angela nodded gratefully. I packed my beige resume and my grandmother's phone. At the door, James caught my elbow like he had earned the right to steer me by bringing me to rooms with glass. How'd it feel? He asked quietly. Still want to chase jobs? I can get you a support role here. Start you at the desk near the kitchen. Ease you back in. I kept my face gentle, the way you hold your hand steady when a kitten is about to bite. Thanks, I said. I'll let you know. He patted my shoulder. The elevator hummed. The carpet forgave. I walked to the restroom and locked the door and sat on the closed lid and counted to 10 with my eyes open. At 2, I slipped off my ring and put it into the little zippered pouch Sarah had sewn into the lining of my bag, a habit from a life lived around men who confuse jewelry with jurisdiction. At 3, I dialed Sarah on the clean phone. We have what we need? I asked. Enough to hang policies on, she said. Not enough to hang people. That happens at 11. Security? 2 in the hall, 2 in IT, 1 on the dock. Carlos has the badges in a folder marked catering. He enjoys theater. Board? In the room. Coffee on. The chair has the bylaws on her tablet and the clause printed in 11 point because she thinks 12 point is undisciplined. Facilities? Booked the big room at 10:55. Projector test at 10:57. Your deck loaded under Q3 post-mortem because Derek never opens those. Legal? On silent, she said, which is our favorite setting. I washed my hands slowly and watched water run over skin that didn't care which version of my name was about to walk into a room. I untied my hair, retied it low. I changed my shoes, flats to heels with a good librarian click. I took off the beige cardigan and put on the jacket Sarah had hung inside the handicap stall on a hanger with a piece of tape that said, just in case. It was navy. It meant sentence. At 10:47, I texted the receptionist. Boardroom? She replied with a thumbs up and a chair emoji, which is a woman after my own heart. I stepped into the hallway and walked past reception without breaking stride. The security guard glanced at my face and then at the line of my jacket and gave the almost invisible nod men give when they recognize authority they don't need explained. In the lobby, 2 interns argued in whispers about how to label a spreadsheet. "Call it what it is," I said in passing, and they straightened like pencils. By the time I reached the boardroom door, Sarah had materialized at my shoulder the way competent women do, soundless, and carrying a cascade of contingencies in a clipboard that did not even look heavy. "Stop, P-Watch?" I asked. She held it up. "Disciplined," she said. I put my hand on the door. In the glass, I saw the outline of a woman who had been 2 people this morning. At 9, an applicant. At 11, the reason the projector was on. From inside, I heard Brad's voice telling a story about pipeline as if pipeline were a form of weather only he understood. I heard Derek laugh, Colin hum, Nate murmur a phrase that contained the word family. I heard James. He was mid-sentence, something about my wife and getting her a spot at the desk by the kitchen. The chair cleared her throat. At 11, the room would learn my last name. The boardroom had been staged the way truth deserves to be. Water poured, cords hidden, chairs aligned, clock synced to the projector's clock so there would be no argument later about when a minute happened. The board chair, Annika Roy, sat at the far end with the posture of a woman raised by deadlines. To her right, our general counsel, Thorne, with a folder the color of tax returns. To her left, Elliot from finance, who has never laughed at a spreadsheet in his life. 2 independents were in from the coast, one with a background in compliance, the other a retired COO who still loves a good flowchart. Sarah stood by the wall with a clipboard and a stopwatch, her thumb already poised because she can feel a start before it announces itself. Brad had the floor, clicker in hand. He was mid-sentence, knees apart, benevolent and breathy, sliding through a deck he'd stolen from a SAS blog and repainted with our logo. "Pipeline is healthy," he said, tapping the slide as if it might purr. "More ales high. Culture's thriving." Colin hummed in agreement. Derek chuckled like a man who has taught metrics to heal. Nate wore the gentle, patient face of a head of people who keeps a first aid kit for photo ops. James had chosen a chair 1 notch down from Annika's, the way men choose plates at a buffet because their appetite assures them there's enough. He saw me in the doorway and started to stand, then sat, uncertain whether gallantry or authority would serve him better. He settled for a grin that said he believed in coincidences. The grin faltered when Annika rose. "Let's begin," she said, and her voice carried the hush that rooms obey. "Brad, thank you. Park, you have the floor." Most of them only heard the last name. Annika uses last names like a tennis ump. Brad blinked, then smiled, assuming a vendor named Park was here to compliment his slide. James turned to see who this Park might be and watched me step to the head of the table. It takes a certain kind of muscle to pick up your own name in front of people who have borrowed it for a year. I felt that muscle wake. Sarah pressed the stopwatch. 00:01, 00:02, 00:03. "Good morning," I said. "I'm Park, Lena Park on the filings. Lena to friends. Founder and controlling owner through Kite and Key Holdings. Until last year, CEO, I placed a thin folder on the table, not the thick one. Thick makes men think you're about to read them a novel. Thin means surgical. Today, I'm back. This will be boring by design. Silence has flavors. This one tasted like a sent email finally bouncing. James said my name out loud, incredulous, as if it betrayed him by being pronounceable. "Lena?" he asked the room, needing an ally to confirm reality. "Lena, what?" Your wife," I said evenly. "Also your employer." Annika gestured to the chair at the head. "Park," she said, "please." I didn't sit. I don't sit when I need the room to understand where gravity lives. I stood behind the chair and clicked the deck from Q3 postmortem to bylaws and delegation. The first slide was a screenshot of Section 3.7 of our bylaws. I like starting with code. Section 3.7, I read, authorizes the CEO to suspend and terminate officers for cause, pending board ratification. Schedule A lists causes: insider trading, abuse of subordinates, retaliation for complaints, misuse of company resources, and violations of labor law. I am reinstated as CEO as of 10:58 a.m. today. Slide, signed consent, time-stamped, docu-signed by a quorum. Annika nodded, signature matching the one on the screen. Thorne's pen made a small approving note. Sarah's stopwatch ticked. Brad cleared his throat. "This is unusual," he said, aiming for charming. "We might have discussed—" "We'll discuss," I said, "after we revoke access for anyone who shouldn't have it." "Carlos?" Carlos stepped into the doorway like a blessing in a high-visibility vest translated into a navy blazer. He nodded to IT on his radio. Across the floor, screen by screen, a polite window bloomed. Access revoked. Please contact IT. A tiny chorus of pings made a sound like distant rain. Derek reached for his phone and watched the lock screen refuse him. Colin hummed, and then stopped humming because humming without a phone is humming toward a cliff. "Time check," Sarah said softly. 1:41. I clicked to the next slide. A table of policies: insider trading, acceptable use, anti-harassment, and a column of receipts with redaction bars. "We're going to keep this narrow," I said. "Narrow is respectful." "Narrow travels faster through courts," Nate attempted the reasonable voice. "I wish you'd told us this was coming," he said, smiling, earnest, putting a palm on the table with a faint slap to perform sincerity. "We're a family." "Families don't require NDAs in lobbies," I said, "and they don't assign unpaid weekend tests. Your culture is a risk surface. We're going to sand it." I nodded to Sarah. She tapped the keyboard, and the audio from Angela's interview, my interview, came through the room speakers. Not the whole thing. 30 seconds. "Brad, you sell a little. It's savvy. Compliance writes memos for sport." Derek, unpaid test project. Weekend grind. Nate, we're a family. Hypotheticals are a hobby, I said, and the retired COO on the right nodded once like a metronome. Evidence is a job. We've had complaints, real ones, about retaliation when women said no to unpaid tests, and when men said no to Whiskey Wednesdays becoming evaluation. HR buried. That's a word I don't like in any context. Annika spoke for the board. Park has the chair's delegated authority to secure systems and personnel pending vote, she said, crisp as ledger paper. We will hear specifics now. Specifics, I repeated. Brad, sales. 6 days ago, you traded ahead of a partner announcement. We have the timestamps. Your group text used a phrase I can't read into the minutes. Compliance has the phone. The partner has the courtesy call. Slide. Audit log. Times blurred but sequence clear. Brad's watch suddenly needed his attention. Derek, I continued, acting COO. You've been running test projects with unpaid candidates using internal docs. I know this because you slid an NDA with a demo watermark at a candidate and called it policy. Also, you told a subordinate last quarter, and I quote, "We don't pay for grit. Labor law does." Derek opened his mouth and then found it empty. Colin, I said, strategy. Your hum tells the truth before you do, which I actually appreciate. You've been instructing analysts to change inputs to match pitch. We discovered the spreadsheet you titled aspirational. Numbers are not aspirational. They are either honest or content. Colin's hum came out a minor chord and sat in the corner by itself. And Nate, I said, turning to the head of people, you have used the word family to rubber stamp policy violations. You directed HR to close retaliation complaints as communication issues. You also tried to get a candidate to sign an NDA in a lobby without a legal review. Policy isn't a vibe. Nate looked wounded, as if I'd criticized his loafers. We were trying to be human, he said. Human is paying people for their time, I said. Human is believing a complaint is a signal, not a betrayal. Human is not running whiskey through performance reviews. James shifted in his chair, trying to find the version of himself that could survive this room. He went for familiar. Lena, he said, aiming an old intimacy like a flare. This is... Can we step outside? We'll talk here, I said. Nouns first. I clicked to a slide titled Protocol Thunder, because Sarah had insisted I name it something that would make IT smile. It was a checklist, not a battle plan. Revoke access for the named officers, quarantine devices, notify the partner about the trading concern, call outside counsel to send hold notices, push an all-hands for noon with an agenda that contained 2 sentences, Code of Conduct refresh, we pay for tests, EF. Effective 11/12, I said, reading off the stopwatch. Brad, Derek, and Colin are suspended pending termination for cause under Bylaws 3.7, clauses A, C, and E. Nate, you are suspended pending review and re-interview with the independent directors and counsel. You will not be present for any more candidate interactions until the review is complete. Your accounts are locked. HR will escort you to collect personal items in labeled boxes. You may not remove any paper. You will receive written notice today. If you ask whether you can resign, the answer is yes, with the same restrictions, minus the cause language. Decide by 2 p.m. Brad tried a laugh that had served him in restaurants and on golf courses and had not yet learned it didn't work here. This is insane, he said. We're performing. The quarter is up. The street is happy. The team loves. The team has filed 12 complaints in 8 weeks, I said, and nodded at Elliot, who lifted a printout like a flag. The burn is up. The qual. It's down. And you're using adjectives like sandbags. We are done with weather. We are doing receipts. Derek leaned forward, testing volume as a strategy. You can't fire a whole leadership team in one morning, he said. Deals will die. The press will receive a statement at 1 p.m. exactly, Anika said evenly, which says, we received allegations. We investigated. We took action. The company remains sound. We thank our people for their work. We pay for tests. She turned to me, small nod. Park, proceed. Sarah signaled to Carlos. 2 more pings from the hall. The door opened and HR stepped in. Lydia, precise. carrying 3 manila envelopes and 1 thick white one, with the kind of flatness court printers teach. She set them on the table in a row, the way you set out silverware. Left, right, center. Names on labels. The clock read 11:16. "Counsel," I said to Thorne, "please summarize." Thorne adjusted his glasses, which have never performed for a camera in their life. "Suspension letters for Messrs. Whitmore, Hale, and Singh. Cite sections and attach policy excerpts," he said. "Mr. Ashby's letter cites review under the authority of the board chair and CEO. A litigation hold applies to devices. Copies of the Code of Conduct are included. Return of property schedule on page 3. Signature requested. Questions outside the scope of the letters will be deferred to counsel." James stood abruptly, his chair protesting. It sounded like a small animal remembering a predator. "This is a spectacle," he said, furious, but careful enough to keep it on this side of defamation. "You're humiliating people." "My friends." "Your colleagues," I corrected. "Your friends mocked me in a restaurant for not having a job. Today they discovered they work for me. I suggest we all relearn our nouns." He stared at me like he wanted to find the version of me that would let him turn this into a scene. He found the navy jacket instead. "You set me up," he said. "The interview." "The recording." "The interview was lawful," Thorne said before I could answer, mild as milk. "And your presence in that room was neither necessary nor authorized. You appeared at a candidate interview and made personal comments. That will be addressed in your file separately." James's mouth made the shape of a man unused to the sensation of gravity. "You're ending our marriage," he said, trying pathos on for fit. "I'm ending a structure that injures the company," I said. "The marriage we can talk about elsewhere with counsel on both sides. Here we are talking about payroll, policy, and pressure that bent the wrong way." Brad pushed the envelope with his name like it might hiss. "You cannot be serious," he said, voice small now, the performative bravado having found itself outside jurisdiction. "I am," I said, "and I am also disciplined. You have 10 minutes to read. HR will answer process questions. Counsel will answer legal ones. You will leave your badges on the table. If you raise your voice, security will treat it as a safety issue. If you attempt to access any system from your phone, IT will add that to the hold. This is not personal. This is stairs. Please walk down them." Sarah's stopwatch read 12:03. We had slipped the meeting into a rhythm so clean I could feel my father's approval like a hand on my shoulder. He loved schedules. He used to say, "If you give truth a timetable, liars hate it." Nate cleared his throat, low and wounded. If I pass the review," he asked, "do I still have a place?" "If you pass," I said, "you'll have a place you earn. No more families, policies, pay, protections. You'll learn to love paperwork. It rescues more people than charisma ever did." Annika held out her hand for the stopwatch. Sarah passed it. Annika pressed the button with the pleasure of a woman who enjoys a clean lap. 10 minutes for reading," she said. "We reconvene to collect badges and close. Park will host an all-hands at noon. The message will be plain. Brother." Ad looked at James as if James had saved him from weather before. James stared back and found for the first time a sky that was not negotiable. He turned to me and opened his mouth. I shook my head once, a tiny gesture some people mistake for mercy, and he closed it. I sat, finally. the navy jacket folding itself with the economy of a tool. I wrote a single word in the margin of my notes. Rails. Sarah's pen echoed mine. Carlos stood very still by the door. The gentlest wall I've ever seen. In the hallway, somewhere not far enough away, a printer obeyed. In the lobby, the receptionist answered a phone with her name, then said, "One moment," then said, "Yes, ma'am," the way cities stay civilized. The projector hummed. The clock rolled to the next minute without fanfare. In 10, we would collect the badges. In 20, we would stand in front of the company and say, without adjectives, what happens next. The first badge hit the table like a coin, flat, declarative. Brad set it down as if placement might negotiate consequences. Colin followed, carefully aligning his badge to Brad's, like men arranging chess pieces, even after the game has been called. Derek hesitated a beat too long, then put his down face up, perhaps hoping the camera hole would appeal to a god. Nate's badge stayed on his belt. He was suspended, not severed. And even in this, procedure had a politeness. Lydia distributed envelopes. Thorne answered 2 short legal questions with answers that could stand upright on their own. Carlos watched hands, not faces. Sarah clicked the stopwatch and spoke like a school bell. 10 minutes elapsed. Thank you. We're moving. Brad tried to make eye contact with James. James looked at the wood grain. Suddenly a man who noticed furniture. Derek opened his mouth, found a speech too large to fit through the rules, and shut it. Colin hummed a small, embarrassed song. Nate nodded at Sarah, wit, the kind of gratitude you reserve for the person who may yet write you back into the book. Annika stood. "We'll reconvene at 2 for the board vote," she said. "In the meantime, Park has the helm." She turned toward me, a baton in her hand you couldn't see, and added, "Make the noon count." Noon matters. Companies are temples of time. If you tell a room your noon will be noon and then you make it noon, rooms remember. The all-hands sat in the atrium because chairs matter, and we own 300 of them. The balcony ringed the space like a cautious amphitheater. IT had set up 2 screens. Facilities had taped down cables in exact right angles. Someone with taste had turned down the HVAC so the microphones wouldn't learn to hiss. I climbed a small platform and didn't put my hands on the lectern. I don't like wood between me and the people who keep a company alive. Sarah stood a few feet to my right with the stopwatch, as if time were something we could pay back if we borrowed it. Annika stood behind, in the rail on the mezzanine, visible and still. Thorne and Lydia flanked the floor like punctuation. Carlos and 2 others posted at the doors without theater. James drifted at the back edge of the crowd, a man pretending to be nobody while wanting to be watched. At 12 o'clock exactly, the screen behind me went from logo to the words Code of Conduct. No italics, no brand gradients, big letters that like nouns. "Good afternoon," I said. "I'm Lena Park. Some of you know me. Some of you know lore. Here are the facts. I kept it under 5 minutes because discipline is love in a room like this. Today at 11:12, we suspended 3 officers and remove them from systems for cause. The board will vote at 2. An additional officer is suspended pending review. We'll communicate the vote in writing at 3 with FAQs and open hours for questions. Murmur, then quiet. People in companies know the difference between gossip and minutes. They heard minutes. We are not here for adjectives, I continue. Edited. We are here for receipts. Over the last 8 weeks, we received multiple complaints of retaliation, misuse of candidates' time, and pressure to socialize as a condition of advancement. We investigated. We found enough to act. We acted. I let silence carry the verbs across concrete. It did. Somewhere on the second ring, somebody took a breath the room could hear. Here's what changes today. I raised one hand and counted each item because fingers are a kind of underline. 1. We pay for tests. If you ask a candidate to do work you will use, you pay them. Stipend forms are in the portal by 3 p.m. Lydia will show you where. 2. We don't say family. Families can be beautiful. Families can be confusing. Families don't have HR. We are colleagues. We have policies. We have rails. Rails save ankles and careers. 3. If you have a complaint, retaliation is a red phrase. When you type it, a second inbox opens with a different key. The independent directors will see those. Anonymous is allowed, not mandatory. Anonymous doesn't make you smaller. It makes the system bigger. 4. White space. There will be no alcohol at events that relate to evaluation. If you want whiskey, you can make a friend's calendar the way adults do. You will not be graded on your liver. 5. We don't hum our numbers. We publish them. My first hire back is a director of integrity analytics. They'll sit near engineering, not finance, because numbers deserve love, not spin. 6. We will rebuild recruiting. There will be no NDAs in lobbies. There will be no unpaid weekends. There will be a calendar. It will like you. On the mezzanine, a woman with a long braid, someone in QA, folded her arms and nodded once. A blessing given not to me, but to the idea. 7. Promotion panels will include a person from outside your group. Diversity is not a slide. It's a quorum. 8. If you're afraid right now, good. Fear wants fast. Procedures like slow. We will slow down to fix what needs fixing. Your deadlines will live in daylight. A hand went up, shy, then brave, stage right, near the ficus we keep because it likes this building. What if our manager was part of that? A beat to find the word. That. Then you have 2 choices, I said. Raise your hand to Lydia after this, or email the address on the screen. We will not make you the courier of your own safety. Another hand, warehouse judging from the key ring and the posture of a man who solves problems with weight, not slides. Do we have jobs? He asked. It was not rhetorical. It was not dramatic. It was the shortest theology. Yes, I said. We have jobs. We'll have clearer ones by Friday. We are not flipping tables. We are sanding them. Someone laughed softly in relief, a sound like a stool scooting under the right body. On the balcony, I saw 2 engineers look at each other and exchange the specific glance of people who have survived 6 reorgs and are trying to decide if this one is different. I gave them the one gift I could in 5 minutes: specificity. This afternoon, I said, you'll receive the code. It's short. Read it, sign it, ask questions. We'll run sessions next week where you can ask, what if? And we'll say, here's when, and here's who, and here's where you can stand while you ask again. I took one last breath, let it out, and borrowed a sentence from my father without telling the room where it came from. If you give truth a timetable, liars hate it. Here's our timetable. The screen shifted to 3 boxes with times and nouns. 1 p.m. Press statement. We received allegations. We investigated. We acted. Company sound. Tests paid. 3 p.m. Board vote result plus FAQs in your inbox. Open door, 3:30 to 5, conference rooms A to D. Next week, listening hours, code workshops, recruiting rebuild, finance teach-in on aspirational versus actual. We're done in 4 minutes, I said, glancing at Sarah's watch. Back to work. Better work. Safer work. Thank you for building this with me. No applause. I hadn't given them a crescendo. I'd given them a calendar. But on the mezzanine, someone started that soft palm sound anyway, the kind of clap rooms make when they're not sure if they're allowed to be happy and decide to practice. It didn't swell. It didn't need to. People turned back toward their desks with faces that had more geometry and less choreography. As the crowd thinned, a woman in a maintenance polo came up, her badge on a retractable cord that has learned to behave. Miss Park? She said. Lena, I said. I'm Letty, she said. I don't go to whiskey. I go home. I'm tired. I clean the kitchen after certain people's parties. Will I still clean the kitchen after their parties? No, I said. They can have parties that are not on the calendar and not in this kitchen. They can also wipe their own counters. Letty grinned, then grew serious. There's a dishwasher that leaks on 5. You can hear it if you stand quiet at night. Thank you, I said. Leaks are my love language. I wrote it down. In a week, we would replace the seal. When people saw the floor dry, they'd understand faster than any slide. On my way off the platform, an engineer in a hoodie that had seen too many winters stopped me with a polite hand wave. My team filed 2 complaints last month, she said, voice even. We never got a reply. Do we resend? They're in the new inbox, I said. They'll get a case number by 5. If they don't, email me 1 sentence. No case number. I'll fix the path. Okay, she said, and looked like she might let her shoulders spend an hour somewhere lower than her ears. James tried to intercept me by the staircase, attempting to stand in a flow of people without being a wall. You humiliated me, he said, pitched for privacy but not for contrition. I disciplined a company, I said. You stood nearby. You were Angela, he said, hurt transmuted into indictment. You came into my building and played a part. Our building, I said. Anne, not a part. A test. You didn't study. He opened his mouth for a memory. I didn't give the room to hear it. We'll speak at home, I said. With a calendar. With counsel. Not here. Sarah was suddenly at my shoulder, the clock in her hand. Press in 20 minutes, she said quietly. Athena called, partners aligned to the 3-sentence statement. Thorne approved the period placement. Sandy says the bank appreciates plain English. Alvarez, she caught herself with a small smile. Wrong story, Lena. Wrong story, I echoed, and the echo did me good. Not everything is my job. Not every story is a fight. Some are chairs. Back upstairs, the board reconvened with a briskness that made the room feel taller. The Independents asked 2 questions about contingency hiring. Elliot answered with 3 numbers and no poetry. Thorne read the resolution. Annika called the vote. Hands went up in a pattern that suggests competence reproduces. "Motion carries," Annika said. "Park, send your notes." "All right." "Eddie drafting," Sarah said, not looking up from her clipboard. "Next," Annika said, "interim appointments." I had 3 names. I had reasons. I had receipts. We appointed Willa from compliance as acting head of people, because nobody understands kindness like someone who files things well. We appointed Mohan from analytics as acting COO, because he had once built a schedule that saved a supply chain and never told anyone, because people who save supply chains think it's just Tuesday. We appointed Jay from Sales Ops as acting VP Sales, because he likes numbers more than dinners, and because his inbox is always at 0 without making it a personality test. I texted the names to facilities. 10 minutes later, 3 new placards appeared in 3 offices that had been evacuated with more dignity than they deserved. Small things, visible. People believe what furniture believes. At 1 o'clock, our press statement went out. 3 sentences, no adjectives, 1 period placed with Thorne's discussed precision. Anika forwarded partner replies to my inbox. Appreciate the clarity. Prefer boring. We'll take the Thursday call as planned. The share price did the small wobble truth requires and then adjusted its belt and got back on the treadmill. Our PR woman, a genius at not being PR, sent me a text. I told the one reporter who wanted color that beige is the new black. At 1:14, HR sent the stipend form to recruiting with a subject line Sarah wrote, "Tests are work," and the portal swallowed it with a little, satisfied green check. At 1:19, facilities wheeled a cart of seltzer into the kitchen with paper cups and no whiskey, and Letty stood next to the dishwasher and listened. It sighed and shut itself off like a machine who'd been given permission to rest. At 1:31, the partners' legal sent us their insider trading hotline number with a polite, "We'll be in touch," we deserved. At 1:42, the old family Slack channel was archived. At 1:55, Sarah handed me a single sheet labeled Open Ho. Room A, Lena. Room B, Willa. Room C, Mohan. Room D, Jay. 20-minute slots, she said. I put 2 float blocks in yours because you always try to give minutes back like tips. At 2 o'clock, the board vote results landed in every inbox with the subject, "Actions taken. What's next?" I watched the read receipts populate like lights coming on in a neighborhood. At 2:07, a junior dev forwarded it to her personal account with the subject, "I might stay." I don't read employees' personal emails, but she CC'd me on purpose, and sometimes the dignity you can give is to let a person copy you into their decision to stay. At 2:19, James texted, "Can we talk now?" I typed, "Tuesday, 7, agenda to follow." He wrote back a paragraph with the cadence of a fight that wanted to be born. I replied with a dot, and then a sentence I knew would either save us or end us. I will not rehearse chaos. He sent nothing after that, which is a mercy people had tried to teach him before and he'd refused to learn. At 2:30, open hours began. In room A, they lined up. Engineers with quiet panic, an office manager with a list that could have run a continent, the QA with the braid, Letty with the dishwasher memo, a new grad who needed to know if unlimited PTO was still a dare. It wasn't. We put numbers on it. Numbers save spines. I wrote. I nodded. I assigned. I said, I don't know. I'll get back to you. 5 times. Those are the most honest words a leader ever gets to say. At 4:50, the last slot ended. I walked back through the hall where, this morning, I had walked as Angela. The air had a new weight, not heavy, rated, like a bridge after the inspector's stamp. In the glass, I caught a glimpse of myself with the navy jacket slung over my arm and a coffee stain on my cuff I hadn't noticed until now. I left the stain. Companies don't need immaculate leaders. They need explicit ones. On my desk sat the thin folder from the morning, bylaws and delegation, and under it, the thick one, complaints and rec. Heaps I put the thin one on top, then slid both into the drawer with the confidence of a person who trusts drawers. Sarah leaned in the doorway and lifted the stopwatch one last time. "We made your noon," she said, pleased and tired. "We made rails," I said. "Same difference," she said. I picked up my ring from the zippered pouch where Angela had put it and held it in my palm for a long second, considering metal and promises and nouns. Then I set it, not on my finger, not on the desk, but in a small ceramic bowl labeled keys the receptionist had given me as a joke 3 years ago when she realized I collect containers for things I don't want to drop. Tomorrow would be Protocol Funder's slower half. Audits, interviews, rehires, retros. Tonight I had one more meeting. A call with the independent directors to draft the exact language for Nate's review, and a sentence for the all-hands tomorrow that would tell the people who hadn't asked questions today that their questions are not late. And then, because I had promised myself not to make emergencies into hobbies, I would go home to a kitchen where my father's tea tin still lives, and I would boil water, and I would write the first paragraph of the email I would send to James, proposing 2 times on Tuesday, with a third neutral adult CC'd, and I would label it what it was: agenda, nouns. There's a kind of quiet that comes after a noon like ours. Not relief rate, like a bridge that has just received its stamp. The atrium returned to key clicks and shoe squeaks. Facilities rolled up the mic cables with that tenderness people reserve for instruments and arguments that did their job. At 5:05, I took the call with the 2 independent directors and Thorne to set the railings for Nate's review. We wrote it like we wanted him to succeed without letting the company fail. Willa, the interim head of people, sat in. Plain notebook, clean pen, eyes that never ask rooms for permission. We kept it to 4 sections: candidate handling, complaint routing, alcohol policy, retaliation triage. For each, 1 sentence that defined the job, 1 question he'd answer, 1 receipt we'd bring. "Don't spring," Willa said. "State, show, ask." She wrote it on the top of her pad like law. Thorne insisted we script the first 3 minutes. "People flail when they smell chance," he said softly. "Script. It's our stairs," we drafted. "You're suspended with pay pending review. We want you to pass if you can. We'll ask about your actions, not your adjectives. If you need a break, say break. If you don't know, say don't know. We'll respect both." We scheduled it for 10 a.m. tomorrow. We told him to bring nothing and expect everything. He replied all caps, "Okay," then "thank you" a minute later, as if gratitude had to locate itself. Sarah slid into the doorway with a gesture I've come to recognize as incoming, not urgent. Recruiting had sent a list of every candidate asked to do weekend tests in the last 12 months, with dates, projects, and whether their work had been used. 50 names. 35 used. We did the mean arithmetic. 35 stipends plus apology letters that avoided the word sorry as a shield and used it as a fact. Make it short, I said. 4 parts: what happened, what we're paying, what we're changing, who to call. Willa volunteered to sign each one. Ad of people should own past people, she said. And I want to read every name, she frowned. Let's add a line. If you want to reapply now that we pay for tests, here is the calendar. The first round is identical for everyone. The second has rails. I nodded. And ask for receipts if they already sent us ours. We'll top up beyond the flat rate. Mohan, acting COO now, arrived with the week's burn and the version we call the house number. He laid down 2 prints like X-rays. We can absorb the stipends from the events line if we delete 2 whiskey budgets, he said. We'll reclassify recruiting subscriptions from swag. He doesn't tell you he has saved you money. He hands you a schedule that already spent it better. Jay, acting sales, stood in the hall like a person who likes to be invited. I moved 2 deals away from Brad's name to the team, he said. The clients won't see the switch if we make the Tuesday call clean. He looked at the whiteboard where I'd written tomorrow's all-hands bullets and added under his breath, no more pipeline weather. Give me the 3 nouns for your team, I said. Leads, contracts, cash, he replied without romance. Everything else is garnish. You're hired, I said, and he laughed like a man who doesn't need the laugh to be noticed. At 6:12, I walked through the 5th floor kitchen with Letty. The dishwasher sighed when it hit its leak cycle. She pointed. I crouched. We listened. It clicked, then dribbled, then tried again. Good intention, bad seal. Tomorrow, I told her. Label says model 702. She shook her head at me, affectionate and annoyed. You are CEO, she said, and you are writing down model number. Numbers are my love language, I told her. And she relented, handing me the roll of blue tape she keeps at her belt like a sheriff. In room B, Willa held open hours and wrote down 3 things that would have taken other heads of people 3/4 to notice. The receptionist's chair is 2 inches too low. The front door call box mispronounces 4 names. The warehouse clock is 7 minutes fast, making everyone look late. She wrote corrective actions next to each in block letters and emailed facilities and IT at 6:29 p.m. with a subject line that did not beg or scold. 3 things, 3 fixes, 3 days. We met Nate at 10 sharp the next morning. Willa set the room with water and a Kleenex box, and a wastebin that didn't have a view of anyone's face. Sarah sat in the corner. Not a camera, a memory with thumbs. Thorne had printed the 4 sections and stapled them without zest. Nate looked like a man who had practiced contrition in the mirror and decided against it. He sat, clasped his hands, unclasped them, nodded at everyone, then found the Kleenex box with his eyes and hated it for being in the room. I read the script we drafted. He asked for a break on the word retaliation. We paused 3 minutes. The stopwatch ticked. Sarah placed it face down the way you calm a pet. C.A. Candidate handling. Willa began when we resumed. Describe the test projects. He told a story many good talkers tell when policy has an audience. He made them mentorship. He called them, give us a taste. He said, we're a family 3 times in 10 minutes like a talisman that used to work. Willa let him finish, then read 3 quotes from candidates who had done usable work for free, including one who wrote, I was afraid to say no. I needed the job. I did the work. They never called me again. Nate's face did the small collapse men's faces do when the consequence finally finds the right door. We meant to pay, he tried. Did you pay? Willa asked, voice without vinegar. No, he said. And in that moment, the room had more oxygen. Complaint routing, I said. How many retaliation complaints did you close as communication issues? 5, he said, then corrected himself to 4, then looked at the paper and corrected again to 6. Thorne did not blink. Sarah's pen made one line P, our number, no slash across the bundle. Willa read one excerpt. When my manager asked me to drinks after I said no to the test, and I didn't go, I got put on the weekend pager. I asked why. He said, "This is a team." Nate said quietly, "I didn't escalate because I thought the board cared about growth." He meant pipeline. He meant applause. He meant the kind of emails that use graphs like bait. Boards care about compliance, Thorne said mildly. And so do prosecutors. And so do people who want to go home to their kids on Fridays without owing drinks to the difference between a raise and a warning. We moved to whiskey. We moved to the word family. Willa asked him to define it without using the word. He tried support, belonging, fun, and no jerks. She waited. He found pay, policy, and not making me earn safety in bars. Closer, she said. Try again. Fewer adjectives. Colleagues, he said finally. With rails. Willa nodded once, then set down her pen. We have 2 outs. Comes, she said. Fail with grace. You resign with references on the parts you did well, and a statement that you mistook vibes for policies. Pass with rails. You stay under supervision. Rebuild recruiting with a calendar, and stipends, and complaint routes that go around you. Pick in 24 hours. If you stay, we remove family from your vocabulary. You'll relapse. We will correct. You'll write a letter to candidates saying what changes. I'll sign it with you. He looked younger for a second, which is both the danger and the opportunity in men like Nate. They are boys who never got told that charm is not a job description. I want to pass, he said. I want to learn paperwork. Then do, Willa said. We'll put you on week 1. Think of it as onboarding. By 11, he'd signed the acknowledgement, and Willa had a skeleton calendar for recruiting that looked like a bus schedule. I love bus schedules. They insist that the world arrive. The press did what press does when you offer them beige. One outlet tried to add a villain arc. We replied with the 3 sentences and a photo of the Code of Conduct table of contents. They ran our sentences and our photo and used a headline that did not bleed. 3 candidates replied to Willa's apology template within an hour with versions of, "Thank you for paying me for last year. I'll reapply." None of them said family. One said, "My rent thanks you." Willa printed that one and taped it above her screen, like a hymn. Jay's team shipped 2 contracts. Mohan merged 2 aspirational spreadsheets into one actual. Elliot found $22,000 in the events line we could reuse for stipends, and then flagged a plan to replace the cheapest whiskey with sandwiches for Employee Appreciation Day, and renamed the day Payday, because naming things honestly is cheaper than branded cupcakes. At lunch, I walked the floor. People did the thing they do when leadership walks the floor after a fire, half glance, half pretend not to mind, half want tea, who show you their work, half beg you to respect that you are interrupting it. I paused at the QA woman with the braid. She had 3 sticky notes and no patience for bad tickets. 3 phrases, she said by way of greeting. I don't reproduce. Give me steps. As designed is not designed, she grinned. Did you rename us yet? Quality assurance makes us sound like we bless products with incense. "What do you want to be called?" I asked. "Quality engineering," she said. "We break, we build." "Done," I said. People believe a place when the labels understand the work. By 2, the stipend wire had the bank's scheduled check and a human name from the wire desk who signs emails like a person. Willa wrote a note to the candidates using no exclamation points and 4 instances of the word receipt. She ended it with a sentence that would have saved much of my 20s. "You owe us nothing for our mistake." At 3:30, I sat with the warehouse team in room C. They brought the clock that it runs 7 minutes fast. It looked fine. It lied. We looked at the back, sticker from a vendor who whines on Wednesdays. "I'll swap it," Mohan promised, adding clock to a list that already had seal, chair, and call box names. The foreman, Marcella, who could lift the building if we set it on a pallet, asked if forklift research training could happen on company time and not Saturdays. "Yes," I said, "and with coffee." She nodded, bottom line 0, and I loved her for it. At 4, James appeared in my doorway and knocked on the frame like a person who wants to try good behavior on for an evening. He wore a shirt without a tie, and the expression of a man who knows words won't win him minutes. "Tuesday," he said, not a question. 7, I said. "Agenda will be nouns. Topics, rent, car, counseling, the dog, the ring." He looked at the small ceramic bowl where the ring sat like a coin. "You always loved containers," he said, as if that observation might buy him credit. "Containers keep. Room's honest," I said. "So do calendars." "I was cruel," he said, "at dinner." "You were," I said. "We'll discuss it with the person whose job is to keep rooms from letting cruelty run the meeting." He nodded. He took 2 steps back. He searched for a line to end on and found none that belonged to this room. "Okay," he said, a sentence that is sometimes the best kind. After he left, Sarah leaned in with her head tilted, a question mark without punctuation. "You okay for the 5 o'clock?" she asked. "What's 5?" I said, and she smiled in a way that told me I should know. "Integrity Analytics," she said. 3 finalists. We pay them for the work. They're all better than the last 4 we lost for free. We interviewed them with the new rails. 1 hour, 1 problem, 1 whiteboard, 2 breaks. Aisha, ex-audit, current truth teller, wrote, "Actual greater than aspirational," at the top of her board without showboating. Hui, operations with a math degree that speaks 3 languages, drew a timeline that would make Mohan weep, and me cook him dinner. Pilar, non-profit survivor, spreadsheet artist, asked one question no one else thought to ask. "What are the numbers you're embarrassed to publish?" I offered her the job before the whiteboard marker dried. She accepted with a smile that looked like an invoice paid. We ended the day with a short note to the company. Subject line, "What happened? What happens next?" It contained 3 bullets and no dessert. Board vote ratified. Stipends initiated. Tomorrow's schedule. We included the link to the complaint route with the red phrase, "retaliation," and a line I borrowed from the library where I learned how to stand. "If you don't know who to ask us anyway, and we'll point." I stayed late enough to watch facilities remove the fake ferns from the 3rd floor because no one watered them, and the dust offended Letty. I walked past the 5th floor kitchen and heard the dishwasher finish politely and not weep. I turned off my office light with the grace Sarah deserves, and took the elevator down, heels making that librarian sound I like, the marble returning the favor. Home looked like a place that had been waiting for an adult to be kind to it. I boiled water in my father's dented kettle. I wrote the Tuesday agenda. Rent, car, counseling, dog, ring. I added one more line I would bring to the room and let the counselor see me say without hurrying. We keep nouns. We resist whether I slept. Not miracle sleep. Procedural sleep. The kind that comes when the dishwasher doesn't leak. The stipend wires are scheduled. The head of people likes calendars. And the boy who used to get laughs from calling a culture a family has agreed to learn policy instead. Tomorrow we would publish the code with a table of contents that fits on a page, and a story short enough to belong in an employee manual. Tomorrow the recruiting calendar would click live with Rails. Tomorrow, QA would be QE. Tomorrow, the door would open, and no one would be asked to sign an NDA in the lobby. Tomorrow, culture would count. The code shipped at 9 a.m., like a train that respects its tracks. Subject line: read me, sign me, ask me. 14 pages total, but the thing that mattered fit on one. A table of contents you could put in your wallet. We printed it big and taped it in kitchens and copy rooms, and the glass beside the elevator that likes to hear conversations but not keep them. Section 1. We pay for tests. Section 2. No retaliation routes around managers. Section 3. Alcohol is not evaluation. Section 4. Colleagues, not family. Section 5. Honest numbers, published. Section 6. Interviews with Rails. Section 7. Managers trained, not deputized. Section 8. Doors stay open if you knock with a noun. At 9:03, signatures started to land in the portal with that delightful green check that makes software feel like a person who approves. By 9:30, we had 69% signed. Engineers lead, warehouse a quick second, sales slower because Jay made them read before they signed. He told them, if you can skim a contract, you can, and skim this, but you will not. And then stood there, hands in pockets, until the rustle of pages became the sound of grown-ups deciding to be grown-ups. Pilar started at 10 with a backpack, a lanyard that didn't match anything, and a smile shaped like the word receipt. She took a desk in the slice of floor between product and finance and hung a single 8x10 on the wall. Actual greater than aspirational. I asked her what she needed. Access, a whiteboard, and permission to be boring, she said. 2 of those we have, working on the 3rd. She drew 3 boxes: intake, publish, teach. Under publish, she wrote Tuesdays, 3 p.m. Numbers deserve a standing appointment, she said, and Elliot passed by at that exact minute and blessed it with a nod. Recruiting pushed the stipend wires and the apology letters at 10:22. The letter said what Willa promised it would. We asked you for work. We used some of it. We didn't pay you. Here is the stipend. Here is what changed. If you wish to reapply, Rails are. E. Attached. It had a line at the bottom, most apologies lack. A case number for this payment, in case anything breaks. By noon, 2 candidates had replied with a screenshot of rent paid, and one asked if Rails included clear time boxes for interviews. Willa wrote back, yes. 1 hour, 2 breaks, no surprise panels. You will never be asked to drink a policy. At 11, IT flagged a near miss you only catch if good people still decide to be good when no one is watching. One of Brad's lieutenants, still on payroll, still scared of gravity, had opened an incognito window and tried to export his prospect list to a personal drive. The new rule greeted him instead. This action is unavailable during account review. If you believe this is an error, click here to request an exception. He clicked. Jay walked to his desk with a printed policy and a chair pulled next to his and said quietly, "If that file belongs to the company, leave it here. If it belongs to your future, pitch it to your mana." There is now a route for both. The man closed the window like a child learning not to touch the stove, because the stove belongs to physics. We held the first code workshop at lunch. No slides, just the one page on the wall and chairs in a circle, like a school that respects its students' time. I opened with a sentence that disarmed people without asking them to applaud. If you think this is obvious, good. If it is, it will be easy. Then I asked, what would make it hard? They told me. The manager who liked to schedule quick drinks as if calendars should pour. The family Slack channel that turned into a grading rubric. The habit of treating a complaint as a failing grade instead of a maintenance request. Willa wrote on the whiteboard in block letters, "We fix systems, not people." Then she added, smaller, "Sometimes we also fix people." In the afternoon, we put James on rails. Not punishment, process. He kept his individual role and lost interviewing privileges and people management duties, pending a short training and a longer conversation with a person who knows how to teach men that charisma doesn't count as compliance. Thorne wrote the memo in the neutral tone that says, "We expect you to succeed because it's cheaper than severance and kinder than spectacle." I sent it to James's inbox with the subject line, "Exactly as humane as it needed to be. Interim duties and guardrails." He replied, "Received," and then, a minute later, "Understood." It is an underrated sentence. At 2, the roomer arrived dressed as empathy. A Slack DM from a friend of the company, offering to share what she's hearing. I read it, then forwarded it to PR. Our PR woman replied with exactly what she always replies. "We don't feed gossip. We feed calendars." Then she pasted the 3-sentence press note again, and I loved her for being a chef who sticks to the menu. We met with the partner at 2:30. Their legal asked for our timeline. Thorne read the minutes, not a narrative, the clock. 10:58, CEO reinstated by written consent. 11:12, suspensions served. 12 o'clock, all hands. 1300, press. 1400, board vote. The partner's GC let out a breath you could frame. "Thank you for timestamps," she said. "They make our life easier." Elliot sent her the PDFs while we were still in the room. Process makes friends faster than charm. Between workshops, I walked the warehouse floor with Marcella. QE, formerly QA, had sent down a cart of new labels, and the aisle signs now matched the inventory database instead of whatever the last shift lead felt like calling things. "Aisle names should not be jazz," Marcella said. She showed me a forklift with a left pedal that stuck and a charge station with a cord that liked to trip smaller legs. We marked both with blue tape and numbers. Maintenance happened at 4. Blue tape came off at 5. Marcella texted me a photo at 5:01. Clean floor, safe cord, a thumbs up that didn't need words. At 3, I walked into a room labeled Conference D and found 20 people who don't love microphones. We did what if. What if your boss is your friend? Then take it to the person who isn't your friend, because friends have jobs too. What if you think a number is wrong but your manager says publish anyway? Bring it to Pilar on Tuesday at 3. She'll teach your manager to love underlines. What if someone says we're a family into a microphone, We put $1 in a jar, which we'll donate to the city library, because libraries keep rules alive quietly. Letty stuck her head in at 3:20. "Seal replaced," she said, triumphant. "Dishwasher no longer cries." The room clapped the kind of clap reserved for ordinary heroics. Letty bowed without sarcasm and went back to her cart like a woman who knows prestige is for ovens and file cabinets. The second near miss of the day came at 3:47, when a junior engineer received a text from an unknown number offering a back channel to get your resume out fast. We'd warned about these in the workshop. She forwarded it to AbuseAt and wrote one line. "Is this a scam or a tantrum?" IT replied in 4 minutes. "Tantrum. Thank you. We tightened a filter. We did not chase the source. Sometimes dignity is not hunting." At 4, Pilar stood up at her whiteboard and gave the first integrity office hours. 5 people came with numbers that made them itchy. A bug count that always ended at 9, as if double digits were bad luck. A sales sheet with a column labeled narrative that somehow moved totals in a way math classes never taught. A budget with a line called events that paid for whiskey. Pilar wrote 3 verbs next to each: publish, rename, reclassify. The room learned a new reflex. Before drama, inventory. At 5, Willa and I sat down with the receptionist and the warehouse gate guard to practice the passphrase we added to interview day. It is a sentence, not a secret word, so scammers have to do grammar. The gate guard went first, voice flat like a man who has heard too many explanations. You can't put cumin by the sink in a sentence. They can't ride the elevator. The receptionist, who loves chairs the way I love clocks, added, "And no sofas in the elevator," which made us all laugh, even though none of us quite knew why that line felt like policy. We pushed a small change to the lobby after hours sign. Deliveries must have a name and a sentence. It is amazing how much mischief dies when you ask people to speak out loud in a way that feels like homework. All day, HR collected exit items from the 3 officers who had left yesterday. Lydia staged the rooms like you stage houses, only in reverse. Remove trophies. Leave the chair in the light. Replace the nameplate with a little laminated card that says acting and under it the word welcome. People believe a company faster when it remembers to be polite while it heals. At 6, I walked to the mezzanine and stood against the rail and watched the floor change color as laptops closed. I could hear the city outside doing its evening math. Sarah came up next to me with 2 cups of water and a look that said, "You have 10 minutes before your next thing. Use them like numbers." "We're past the part where spectacle helps," she said. "Spectacle never helped," I said. "True," she said, "but it gets the clicks." The thing after clicks is chairs. We watched Jay leave with a stack of contracts he would read at his kitchen table. We watched Mohan cross to facilities with a box of new batteries for clocks. We watched Willa hold the door for Letty's cart like the cart had saved the quarter. We watched Pilar draw 3 underlines beneath actual greater than aspirational, and then turn off her lamp with a contented, nerdy flourish. We watched the dishwasher stay quiet. At 7, I met James and a counselor in a room with unthreatening art and chairs that were so honest they had to have been selected by a woman who has seen couples try to litigate each other with pillows. But that's another room's story. In this one, I'll tell you one thing only. When the counselor asked James what he wanted, he said, "To be told what the rules are so I can keep them." And then he flinched, as if expecting mockery. I didn't mock. I wrote down in my head a sentence that might yet be useful. Rules save more marriages than grand gestures. Back home, I opened the fridge and found a sticky note from myself that I don't remember writing. Don't make emergencies your hobbies. Eat. I did. Soup, because soup is the only food that tastes like calendars. I answered 3 emails with verbs only: publish, route, schedule. I deleted one with adjectives. I read one message twice. An engineer who had left last year wrote, "I'd like to come back if the numbers are as honest as your memo." I wrote back, "We publish on Tuesdays. Come sit with Pilar next week and decide." Before bed, I signed my own code acknowledgement, because leaders sign too, and added one line in the questions box because that's allowed. What do we do when the rule hurts a person it was meant to protect? I didn't know the answer yet. I wanted the system to answer, not my charisma. That's what tomorrow is for. Tuesday began with numbers and ended with chairs. In the middle, an outage tried to make itself the main character and learned it was just another calendar item with a runbook. At 8:10, Pilar sent the first integrity bulletin. Plain text, 3 sections, no flourish. Tuesdays, 3 p.m. Publish, burn, bookings, bugs open/closed, deltas versus last Tuesday. Color code retired, words only. If a number moves, we note who moved it and why. She added one line that made Elliot smile into his coffee. Totals must add. Narrative cannot. It's astonishing how much oxygen rooms find when you pin that sentence to a wall. At 8:27, Thorne pinged. The partners outside council wanted our logs for last week's timeline. We had them, because Sarah keeps time like a watch with feelings. She exported the minutes with the headers Annika likes. Who, what, when. No adjectives. And slid the PDF into a folder named for the date and the case number. Thorne replied to counsel with attached, and the kind of quiet lawyers use when they trust their paper more than they trust their charm. By 9, Willa had the complaint route's red phrase, retaliation, wired into a second inbox that sat on a server Thorne controls. The first real test came fast. A report about a manager asking a direct report to grab a drink to talk career now that the family vibe is gone. The direct report declined. The manager scheduled a Saturday quick sync. Willa sent a single-sentence reply. Work is on the calendar. Drinks are not. She CC'd the manager's VP and Pilar's office, not to punish, but to teach. Then she added the appointment to the calendar. Monday, 1400, Conference B. Agenda, role, projects, pay. The red phrase did its job. It made the path bigger than the person. At 10:02, IT's new hire, Dinesh, who wears his headphones like a halo and labels cables with a printer that respects itself, emailed Pilar. Found a spreadsheet called aspirational in a shared drive. Also one called no drama. Both move totals. Pilar was October, printed both, drew 2 arrows, wrote rename or delete, and taped them to her wall like butterflies pinned humanely. At 11:14, Rumor tried to clock in. A Slack thread began in a side channel with the tone of someone offering cigarettes behind the gym. Heard we're getting audited by agency. Heard we're banning happy hour forever. Heard we're cutting bonuses to pay candidates. PR posted in hashtag announcements with 3 bullets. We will cooperate with any regulator who calls. Alcohol is not evaluation, but adults can still be adults. Bonuses are budgeted from performance, not apology. Then PR added a line that has become a house refrain. We don't feed gossip. We feed calendars. The thread died of natural causes. At 12:09, the outage arrived like a fire alarm with exquisite diction. Status page alert, SEV1. API latencies elevated, 2 regions, intermittent auth failures. Mohan said one word into the bullhorn of operations that tells rooms who is driving. Command. He assigned roles without shouting. Incident Commander, Mohan. Comms. PR plus J for customer calls. Scribe. Sarah. Thumb to stopwatch. Liaison. Pilar, because numbers earn trust. Fix. Dev lead Eli, who doesn't love microphones and therefore should have one. We keep a printed playbook in a red binder on a hook by the 5th floor elevator that says, in 28-point font, war rooms are rooms with rules. We walked to Conference A, not ran, because fear wants fast, procedures like slow. Sarah set the stopwatch down, 00:01, 00:02, 00:03, and drew the timeline with a Sharpie on the whiteboard, column by column. T01209, alert fired. T+2, incident declared. T+5, comms draft V1. T+7, customer, noticeet. +10, first fix, attempt. Hypothesis? Mohan asked. Eli, already typing, didn't guess. Symptoms, auth bursts, not steady, certs valid, a flag flip at 11:55. He opened the feature flag dashboard. 2 toggles glowed a guilty yellow. One belonged to a module Brad used to own. Eli swallowed. Not from politics, guilt is contagious, but from care. Roll back the flag, he said. If latencies drop in 60 seconds, we've found a lever. If not, we go deeper. Sarah called times like a coxswain. T+7, she said as PR posted the first status. We're investigating elevated latencies affecting a subset of requests. Next update in 15 minutes. No adjectives, no blame. She handed Jay a script. Acknowledge, confirm, promise next time timestamp, never say soon. Jay pasted it into an email he would send to the 5 biggest customers, and then dialed the first with a tone you can only call useful. T+10, Sarah said. Eli flipped the flag. The graphs hesitated, then exhaled. Green returned like a decision. It's not done, Eli warned. It's just round 1. Round 2, Mohan said. Root cause beyond the lever. Eli traced the dependency chain until he found a cron job we had adopted from the old regime that touched a token cache like it was a cat, affectionately but unpredictably. It purges every 6 hours, he said. It ran on schedule. The flag we flipped made it worse. Disable the cron, Mohan said. Pilar, count the failures to quench fear. Sarah, clock T+18, Sarah said. Job disabled. Errors tapering. Status page. Cause identified. Mitigation in progress. Next update at 12:45. In the middle of the outage, a different kind of emergency knocked. HR pinged. The spouse of a warehouse worker was in the lobby with a baby, looking for keys, scared. Carlos made the kind of decision you want guards to be able to make. He walked to the lobby, checked the name against the list, asked the spouse to say the passphrase in a sentence. The cumin is left of the sink, and then escorted them to Marcella, who had the keys in her palm and the smile of a person who knows that logistics is love. Back in the war room, the timeline stiffened its spine. T+24. Eli wrote a patch to replace the cron with a saner service. +31. Testing in staging. Auth bursts simulated. Stablet. +36. Deploy to one region. +40. Latencies hold. Error rate norm. Alt +45. Roll to second region et. +50. Status update. Mitigated. Monitoring. Postmortem tomorrow, 10 o'clock. We did not clap. We did the thing that replaces applause in competent rooms. We wrote 3 action items and set owners. 1. Replace the cron permanently. Eli, today. 2. Move this class of flags to approvals. Pilar plus product this week. 3. Certificate renewals automated, not calendar reminders. Dinesh, ticket number IA17 this sprint. Jay's customers received final updates shaped like sentences that would pass in court. Start, cause, fix. Timestamps. One replied, "Thank you for not using metaphors." Another, "Appreciate the schedule." At 1:01, we heard the dishwasher finish a cycle without sighing and took it as an omen we had earned. At 1:10, PR posted the internal recap. 12:09 alert, 12:12 incident declared, 12:19 mitigation, 12:45 stable. Postmortem 10 o'clock tomorrow. Blameless. Bring facts. Bring chairs. You can feel a building learn when you publish times like that. Gravity moves to the right corner. Real. People who love drama find themselves bored. People who love chairs find themselves satisfied. At 1:23, one of Derek's former direct reports sent Willa a DM that read, "In the old days, he'd have made us lie to customers about unforeseen vendor issues and then taken us out for a drink to celebrate resilience." This was better. Willa replied with a calendar invite to a workshop titled simply, "How We Speak When Things Break." At 2:05, Pilar walked the war room whiteboard to the kitchen, set it on an easel like a polite altar, and wrote across the top, "What we did when it broke," with the times underneath. Letty stopped to read it while restocking paper towels, nodded once at the line where the dishwasher would have been had it chosen today to leak instead, and went on with her cart like a person who recognizes a tribe by its lists. At 2:30, Thorne returned from a call with an agency acronym that gives executives hives and said, in his calm milk voice, "If they call, we will give them the minutes and the code difference. They like diff. He loves the word blameless and has taught it to the parts of me that used to think leadership was theater." At 3 o'clock on the dot, Pilar published the Tuesday numbers. Burned down $42,000 since last week. Bookings steady. Bug backlog down because QE closed 8 with steps and repros and a link to the fix. Deltas. Support tickets up during the outage period. Notes. Resolved in 41 minutes across 2 regions. She included the sentence I didn't know I was waiting for. We do not rename red as peach. Elliot added a quick financial footnote. Stipends posted. Line events reclassed. The company did not reply with emoji. They replied with silence, which is trust. At 3:18, rumor tried again, this time dressed in legacy. A senior engineer from the old guard posted in a private channel that the outage was a sign we moved too fast firing leadership. Someone forwarded it to me and Pilar and Willa with a note. Do we respond? We didn't. We published. I sent a link to the status page and the post-mortem calendar invite. Pilar posted the difference. Willa posted a one-liner. Come sit in the post-mortem. Bring a chair. The thread lost interest in being wrong. At 4:00, we held the blameless pre-brief for tomorrow. How to talk about a cron job like a grown-up. How to state hypotheses without assigning character. How to end with action items that fit on one page. Eli looked uncomfortable in the spotlight until Pilar wrote in the top right corner, people greater than tools greater than process. We're not going to worship a flag, she said. We're going to name it, label it, and put it where it belongs. At 4:30, the partners' GC sent one line about the insider trading investigation. Thank you for the timeline and the receipts. We'll coordinate notices. Thorne replied, We will not discuss further without counsel. It's my favorite sentence in corporate life. At 5:02, I walked through the atrium just as Jay was returning from a customer meeting. He held the door. R. For a new candidate carrying a laptop and a printed calendar page with her time boxes highlighted. No NDA. No whiskey. She looked relieved in the way people look when they realize the test they've been bracing for includes the chapter they studied. Nate crossed the lobby with a folder and a face that had learned to prefer paper to vibes. He nodded at Willa through the glass wall of Conference B where she was rearranging chairs so no one sat at the head. He's learning headless tables. You can measure cultural change in furniture. At 5:20, Marcella texted me a photo of the forklift pedal fixed and the charge cord clipped above ankle height. She added, Coffee for research, scheduled. I sent back a thumbs up and a calendar invite because I am nothing if not on brand. At 6:00, Sarah put the stopwatch on my desk with the contented sigh of a small animal that has eaten exactly enough. Sev 1, 41 minutes, she said. War room ran like a hymn. She tapped the face. You ready for the Tuesday? 7. Agenda sent, I said. Nouns only. She hesitated, then asked, You want me to sit outside the door? Not to listen, to make sure the meeting obeys time. Yes, I said, grateful for the kind of love that looks like one woman holding a clock for another. At 6:58, I walked into a room my lawyer had picked. Neutral art, a window that faces a tree instead of a street, chairs that don't lean. James was already seated, hands visible, phone face down. The ring bowl between us because I brought it the way you bring documents to a meeting that used to run on anecdotes. Agenda, I said, sliding a single page across. Rent, car, counseling, dog, ring. We will speak in nouns. When we feel weather, we say weather and pause. He nodded. He said weather twice in the first 10 minutes and learned to breathe instead of argue. We moved through rent like adults. We assigned the car payment a date and a routing number. We chose a counselor we both didn't hate for a 6-week trial. We decided that. He dog stays with me during the week and goes with him on Sundays after he learns that parks are for walking, not for requests to rehearse the past. The ring stayed in the bowl, which is not the same as staying in a marriage, and I loved the clarity of that. At 7:42, he said, I told my mother what I did at the restaurant. He swallowed. She didn't clap. I kept my face still. Mothers are not always justice. Sometimes they are weather. I told her I'd like to keep my job, he added, small. I'm doing the training. Good, I said. Do the training. Keep the calendar. At 7:59, I ended the meeting because that was the rule. Sarah knocked at 8 and opened the door like a clock striking. Time, she said. James stood, surprised and, I think, grateful. Tuesday, he repeated, learning the word the way you learn a stare. On the way home, I walked past a shop with a display of blue glazed bowls. I bought one, small, heavy, honest. The shopkeeper wrapped it in paper that had been recycled. So many times it looked like a map. At home, I set the bowl next to the ceramic keys dish. One for rings, one for nouns. I boiled water, tore lettuce, sliced bread, sent 2 emails with verbs only, publish, schedule, and then answered one from Annika that said, "Good war room. Send me the post-mortem when it's boring." I wrote back, "We're halfway there." Before bed, I taped the Tuesday code table of contents inside my closet door, because codes belong where you reach for them. I added a note under Section 8. Doors stay open if you knock with a noun. Add passphrase training to front desk onboarding. Then I turned off the light and listened to the city do arithmetic. And I thought about outages and audits and how civilizations are just agreements about what to do when things break. Tomorrow we would write the post-mortem, and Willa would run the second workshop, and Pilar would publish the diff, and Mohan would replace the cron with a service that liked time, not luck. And Letty would roll paw the dishwasher and hear nothing but its quiet competence. And the elevator would carry chairs, not sofas. And the receptionist would ask sentences. And roomers would clock in and find there was no job for them here. The post-mortem started at 10 a.m. sharp, with a bowl of markers and the red binder on a hook by the door. The one that says, "War rooms are rooms with rules." Eli stood at the whiteboard, not because he loves whiteboards, but because we decided together that love is optional and clarity is not. Pilar sat beside him with a pad and a smile that looks like an underline. Mohan leaned against the credenza where the old regime used to keep catered charcuterie and where we now keep extra chargers and a sign-out sheet for the laser pointer. "Welcome," I said. "This is blameless. If you want drama, there's television." Sarah held up the stopwatch. It clicked like it had been waiting its whole life to time meetings that don't insult it. On the board, Eli drew a line down the middle. Timeline/lessons. Under lessons, he wrote 3 empty boxes, which have a gravity of their own. Rooms want to fill boxes. T01209, Eli said. Alert fired. Elevated API latencies, auth token failures. Our pager woke up and did the thing we pay it to do. He walked us through each minute, no adjectives. The suspicious flag flip. The cron that purged a cache like a cat, pushing a glass off a counter for attention. The rollback. The fix. The deploy. Pilar raised a hand for 2 seconds at each hinge so Sarah could mark the time. The future loves timestamps because they are promises to other days. Root cause, Eli said, was a job we inherited that didn't know it was no longer welcome. Contributing cause, a flag with too much authority. Human factor, we were tired and decided to trust a cron because it had a name we recognized. We wrote the 3 action items again in thick ink that could be read from the hallway. Retire the cron. Approval gate for this class of flags. Automate cert renewals. Mohan added 3 owners and 2 due dates. Pilar blocked off Tuesdays at 3 p.m. for numbers and Wednesdays at 10:30 for truth tea, which got a laugh because once a week is the right amount for humor that wants to be a meeting. Questions came the way we want them to come, curious, not accusatory. Why did we have a cron touching auth? Because 6 months ago we accepted a hand-me-down from a teen that graduated into sales and no one wanted to argue with the past. How will the approval gate work? 2 clicks plus a name. Pilar stores the receipt. What do we say to customers about why? we say exactly what we wrote on the board. A job that used to help started hurting. We removed it and put a better one there. We finished in 42 minutes. At the end, instead of applause, people took photos of the board like tourists who had the decency not to touch art. Letty rolled her cart past the window and looked in with assessment and fondness, the way a person looks at a dog learning a new trick. "Good meeting," she said through the glass. No crumbs. At 11:30, Willa launched the first Manager Basics session with 30 chairs and no head of table. The slide deck had 12 words total and 3 pictures. An inbox, a calendar, a chair. She said, "Your job is to make sure your people have these." And then she did role plays that were somehow both boring and electric. What do you say when someone hints at after-work drinks for career chat? Answer: work is on the calendar, drinks are for friends. What do you say when someone says, "We're family"? Answer: we're colleagues. We have HR. We have chairs. What do you do when someone says retaliation? Answer: you don't argue with nouns. You call Willa. Between noon and 2, checks went out. 35 stipends with apology letters that understood grammar. Willa carried them to the mailroom herself, not because she needs to be a hero, but because she likes to watch systems leave her hands correctly. The clerk at the post counter, who has perfected the art of stamping with ceremony, said, "I like this font." And Willa grinned like a woman who just learned compliments can be about type. The replies began before 2. One wrote, "Thank you. I thought I had imagined the part where my work was worth something." Another, "I cried in the post office. I work 2 jobs. This helps the interview. I'll apply again if the interview doesn't make me feel like homework nobody grades." Willa forwarded each to the small internal list we keep for the things that make the work feel like work. It's called #receipts, not bragging. And Pilar added a check mark emoji because she refuses to use hearts in a work context unless they refer to valves. At 2:15, Thorne told us the partners GC appreciated our timeline discipline and asked for the diff for their file. We sent it. They sent back a sentence most companies never hear: "No further questions today." Elliot framed it, not on the wall, but in his spreadsheet. Cells glow when they carry yes. At 3 o'clock, Pilar published the first actual Growther aspirational report, and the company learned the joy of a meeting that ends because the numbers are done. I read it twice because sometimes contentment is a checkbox, and I like to be sure I'm not dreaming. Bookings steady. Burn down. Bug backlog down. Support tickets up during the outage resolved. We retired a word today, Pilar added at the end. Aspirational is now an art term. Numbers are numbers. People reacted with the rarest emoji in corporate life. None. By late afternoon, the old guard told on itself one more time. Colin sent a note to a private list from his personal email with the subject line, "We were a family." One of the recipients forwarded it to Willa with a one-liner. "Do you want to handle this before someone else does?" Willa thanked them and then wrote to Colin directly. "You can love your team without calling them your family. If you want, I'll help you write a goodbye that uses nouns." He replied 8 minutes later, "Yes." And she sat with him on a bench near the freight elevator and helped him write a note to his analysts that said, "I was wrong about numbers and names. I hope the new cha..." It was not poetry. It was human. At 4:40, Mohan's team replaced the Kron with a service. Dinesh opened a ticket to delete the old thing with a comment that made me want to knit him a scarf. We don't keep ghosts in prod. Eli merged and closed the loop. Sarah stamped the stopwatch on the desk next to the printed diff, and yes, she actually stamped it, because she found a tiny rubber stamp shaped like a check mark at the art store, and sometimes office supplies are how you celebrate when you don't want to spike anyone's blood sugar. James finished his first compliance training and sent me his certificate with no commentary, which is the loveliest commentary. At 5:05, he texted, "Reading the code again." Section 3 made me laugh. Section 3 is, alcohol is not evaluation. My reply was a single full stop because occasionally, punctuation is the only safe gift. At 5:30, the receptionist, Ava, who sees everything, flagged a man in a gray vest lingering near the elevators, R.E. adding the after hours sign. He asked to deliver documents to any manager, a phrase that smells like the old country. Ava smiled like a woman who could politely start a revolution. "If you have a name, I have a sentence," she said. He did not. She showed him the blue door magnet we keep behind the desk, which is not a passphrase but a reminder that we own metaphors now. He left without a scene. Ava wrote a quick note to PR. Attempted delivery, no nouns, sent away with kindness. PR added it to the rumor prevention log we keep with a timestamp and no adjectives. That evening I sat with Annika and the independent directors in a room with a bad ficus that we keep as a reminder that not every living thing wants to be indoors. We reviewed Thunder Week, the sequence from reinstatement to suspensions to stipends to outage to post-mortem. Annika asked for 3 sentences she could use with investors who prefer their bourbon metaphors decanted. I gave her these. Receipts outlast rumors. We made rails people can borrow. I'd rather be boring than brave with payroll. She nodded once, satisfied. Send me the Tuesday numbers when they're utterly unsurprising, she said. And then she did a little thing she does when she means victory. She underlined one word in her notebook and didn't show me which. At home, the blue bowl sat next to the keys dish, honorable as a stone. The ring lay quiet. The dog snored like someone practicing constraint. I boiled water and made a soup that could forgive a day. Onion, garlic, a spoon of tomato paste, beans, lemon, thyme, a handful of small pasta like punctuation. I wrote 1 page of notes for our second all hands, 5 minutes, 3 bullets, 1 sentence for the end that had the right weight. We don't love each other here. We respect each other here. Then I struck love and wrote value. I'm learning to use verbs the way surgeons use scalpels. Wednesday morning, we ran interview rails like it was a class in shop. Willa stood by the door with a clipboard. The candidate arrived with a schedule that looked like a train timetable and a smile that said she could breathe. Aisha, who turned down an offer last year because something felt weird, came back to try again. We paid her a stipend at the end of the day with a letter that called the money what it was, payment for work. That was easy, she said, surprised. That was adult, Willa corrected. At noon, I met with legal and finance to write the investor update. No pomp, 3 paragraphs. We didn't name villains. We named actions and dates. We attached the code table of contents and the Tuesday numbers and the press note and the line that the partner's GC had sent. No further questions today. We added, we replaced an old habit with a service. Elliot slipped in a sentence that made me proud to be old-fashioned. Stipend payments posted from reclassified events line. Impact neutral. Investors don't clap, but they do stop calling when you put numbers into the right. Nouns. Letty asked for a minute in the afternoon, and we gave it to her, with the kind of attention that makes minutes gold. She had a list, naturally. The floor wax used in March makes the third-floor corridor slippery when it rains. The trash pickup schedule causes a bottleneck on Tuesdays at 3. Someone keeps leaving plastic forks in the potted plant near the elevator like a ritual. We can put a sign, she said, but people don't read signs. I told her to pick new wax, change the pickup, and throw the forks away with ceremony. We'll do it Friday at 2, she said. We'll invite facilities and call it a funeral. At 2:20, Marcella reported forklift recert attendance at 100% and thanked whoever added the coffee carafe. People come when you don't make them choose between safety and dignity, she texted, which made me want to cross-stitch a pillow for the break room with her name on it. By late afternoon, a note arrived from HR. Not Lydia, but a junior who hadn't yet learned to be AFAR, aid of email. We're getting fewer "can I speak to a manager about the vibe" messages, she wrote, and more "how do I get a chair unlocked in Conference C" messages. This seems good? This is civilization, I replied. She added a smiley and then, remembering, removed it and wrote, "Thanks," like a professional. James sent a Tuesday follow-up. I've booked the counselor for us next week for the second session. I'll send the calendar. He didn't add weather. I gave him a thumbs-up emoji because sometimes pictures are the best, not words. Then I wrote a one-sentence update to my father. We chose chairs today over heroics, and the company made a nice sound. He replied with a photo of the neighbor kid tightening a chain on the motorcycle. Caption: he learned torque specs. Underneath, a second line. Turns out numbers keep you safe. Thursday, we hosted the first open books session with Pilar and Elliot. 30 minutes, 3 numbers, 10 questions. Someone asked why we don't color code. Pilar said, because we want to read at night without thinking about a traffic light. Someone asked where bonuses come from. Elliot said, performance, not apology. Someone asked if we will ever be a family again. Willa said gently, you already have one. Keep it at home. Bring your calendar here Friday. I carried a stack of letters to the mail slot downstairs addressed to the regulator whose acronym gives corporate comms nightmares. Included, our timeline, our policy updates, our code changes, the stipend checks as evidence of restitution, and a cover letter with 2 big paragraphs and 1 small, where we explained what we did without pretending we deserved a badge. I put a blue tape tab on the corner because tabs are how I tell the world we are not hiding. On the way back up, I ran into Ava eating a sandwich in the lobby because she refuses to leave the desk unattended, and we refuse to make her stand for 8 hours. Yesterday, a man asked me for a manager, she said. I told him we have many. He told me I didn't look like one. I told him we respect nouns here. She smiled down at her sandwich like it had earned a promotion. The week ended the way it began, with schedules and soup. We added a line to the code under Section 8. Doors stay open if you knock with a noun. You can ask any person at any desk where to go to make a thing right. We installed passphrase training in the front desk onboarding. We added no sofas in the elevator to the facilities policy with an asterisk that says, you'd be surprised. I sent one last note before I turned off the office light. What we fixed this week: 1 cron, 1 seal, 3 titles, 35 debts, 4 chairs, and a rumor. What remains? Everything, which is why we built a calendar. I walked to the mezzanine and watched the atrium breathe. People talked in low, practical tones. A cart rolled. A whiteboard got erased and then, critically, relabeled before anyone wrote on it. The dishwasher did not cry. The element. Vator carried chairs and not secrets. The passphrase on the sign by the door made 2 couriers go find names and come back better, and the ring back at home waited in a blue bowl like an object that understands it is not a verdict but a noun. Monday morning, the company learned it had bones. Willa and Pilar published the first version of our leveling guide at 9 a.m. 5 pages, 1 index card's worth of nouns. Title: Ladders, not vines. It described scope, not personality. Each level had 3 lines: what you own, who you teach, what breaks when you're not here. Compensation bands sat beside the levels like chairs next to a table, obvious, sturdy, not to be argued with in the middle of dinner. We taped the 1-page table of contents near the elevators where people pretend to look at their phones. The footer said, "Titles describe work. Work does not worship titles." Willa held 2 sessions in Conference C, with a headless table and a marker that squeaked just enough to feel like progress. She role-played the sentence managers would say when someone asked for a raise. Here is your level. Here is the band. Here are the receipts that move you. The room didn't clap. It wrote. At 10:40, a familiar face leaned on Pilar's wit. Bored, half-smile cautious. Aisha, the candidate who had turned us down last year because something felt weird, had come back Friday to try again under rails. Today, she came to decide. Pilar didn't pitch. She pointed to the wall. Actual greater than aspirational. Tuesdays 3 p.m. The diff from the outage printed and pinned like an X-ray that had healed. I want to work where numbers are furniture, Aisha said. We made the offer at 11:12, with the stipend attached as a receipt, not a favor. She accepted at 11:14, put her start date on the calendar, and asked where QE sits. Near the dishwasher that doesn't cry, I said, and she grinned, because the right people always get the joke. At noon, Elliot and I ran Open Books, our compact 30-minute class for anyone who wants to understand where paychecks come from without needing bourbon metaphors. We covered burn, bookings, and the line called events reclassed to stipends. Someone asked if investors would be mad that we spent money on our mistakes. Elliot said, "We spent money on our people," and the room's shoulders lowered by half an inch in unison. We ended on the sentence Pilar loves. Totals must add. Narrative cannot. The partners' general counsel called at 12:50 with a tone that could double as a level. Your timeline helped, she said. Thank you for not being cinematic. We sent over a copy of the post-mortem and the diff. She replied with a 2-sentence email that belongs in a museum of corporate sanity. No further questions today. Keep publishing times. At 2, Willa sent Nate his review result. Subject, pass, with rails. Body, you stay, you rebuild, you write the letter to candidates with me, you drop family from policy conversations, jar fines apply, you publish your calendar, you do manager basics twice a month. His reply came in under a minute. Understood. Thank you for not making me guess. He delivered his first apology to a candidate that afternoon, voice steady, adjectives absent. Willa signed it with H, and then, in a small move I'll remember, turned to him and said, "Next time you go first." Rumor attempted a comeback at 3:15 when a junior reporter emailed PR for color about the internal bloodbath, a phrase that should be retired to a museum next to ashtrays. PR answered with the 3-sentence note and a link to the code table of contents. "We don't do color," she wrote. "We do calendars." The story ran 2 days later with just the sentences and stock art of a glass building that wasn't ours. Beige wins again. Tuesday delivered numbers and a return. Pilar published Tuesdays 3 p.m. at 3 o'clock on the dot. Burned down $38,000 week over week. Booking steady. Bugs closed up 12%. QE renamed 3 labels. Stipend wires cleared. She added, almost playfully, "This report contains no fruit colors." Elliot appended a footnote. Events line reclass continues, impact neutral. Silence met the post in Slack, which is how trust sounds. At 3:12, I got an email from the engineer who had written I'd like to come back if the numbers are as honest as your memo. Subject, coming home. Sat with Pilar. Sat in Queen Elizabeth's corner. Sat in open books. "I'll come back if you'll have me," she wrote. "And I'd like to bring the documentation we wrote in our heads when we left." I walked to HR and told Lydia we'd issue an offer with the note Willa had put under the stipend letters. "You owe us nothing for our mistake." We sent it before 5 with a start date and a map. Wednesday tried to tempt us with weather. A finance blogger wrote a thread about culture over correction and used phrases like moral panic and anti-fun. Elliot forwarded it with only the subject stray adjectives. Pilar replied with a screenshot of the Tuesday report and the post-mortem. Willa added a calendar invite to How We Speak When Things Break. We didn't dunk. We published. The thread moved on to cryptocurrencies within the hour. The internet likes drama. Payroll prefers chairs. Late morning, warehouse research wrapped W with 100% attendance and no Saturday sacrifices. Marcella sent a photo of her crew holding coffee cups and certificates, like diplomas you could actually use. "We like passing tests we can study for," she wrote. "We like passing tests we get paid to take." We printed the photo and taped it in the break room under a sign that used to say family and now says colleagues with a rent schedule underneath. Facilities finished their name respect ticket. The call box now pronounces 4 names correctly that it had once mangled into origami. Ava practiced each on her lunch break, mouth-forming syllables with reverence. "People come in taller when the door says their name right," she told me. She then pointed to a small laminated card she'd taped to the desk. "Deliveries require a name and a sentence." 2 couriers left today and returned 5 minutes later with both, she said proudly. We gave them a cookie. On Thursday, we held our first Recruiting with Rails clinic. Willa led. Nate sat, pen ready. The agenda had 4 nouns: intake, time boxes, stipend form, offer path. "What about culture fit?" a hiring manager asked. Willa erased the word fit and wrote add instead. "I want to know how they disagree," she said, "how they schedule, and whether they say sorry to chairs." Someone laughed. Nate did not. He wrote add 3 times and circled it. After, he came to my office with a mason jar labeled family tax. "I've contributed $43, he said. "You'll donate it?" "To the city library," I said. "They lend chairs for free." The insider trading drumbeat, faint but real, returned Friday in the form of a letter from a regulator with a case number and an appetite for logs. Thorne responded with his favorite appetizer, timestamps, and attached documents that make men who like insider whispers sigh into their cufflinks. "Thank you for the timeline," the letter back read. "We appreciate your prompt cooperation." PR drafted a 1-sentence internal note. "If you get press queries, forward to PR, and go back to your calendar. The investor call came at 1 p.m. sharp, and Annika ran it like a conductor with a metronome. We opened with, "We investigated. We acted. The company remains sound. Tests are paid." Elliot covered burn and bookings without adding adjectives. Pilar took one question about the outage and answered in times and crons and flags. And one investor, older voice, perhaps a former engineer, said, "Thank you for avoiding the word unprecedented." Q&A asked whether paying candidates invites abuse. Willa answered, "Paying people for work is not abuse. Asking for free work is." The line landed. The call ended early. Beige again. In the afternoon, a final administrative ember from the old regime flickered. Colin and Derek's council sent resignation letters meant to dance around cause. Thorne replied with one sentence, "We accept your resignations. The factual record stands." We didn't forward the letters. We filed them. We did not recycle their chairs. People noticed. Personally, Tuesday at 7 kept its promise. Sarah sat outside the door with the stopwatch like a saint of boundaries. The counselor asked us to restate the agenda. We did. James said weather at minute 6 and minute 19 and minute 31, and instead of a story, he offered a question. What do I do when I want to say a sentence that starts with, "but you"? The counselor pointed to a piece of paper with 3 lines. Ask for 5 minutes. Say what you will do next. Put the rest in a drawer. It made me think of Letty and the blue tape on the dishwasher. Some repairs are not epic. They are seals you replace at 2 in the afternoon because you decided water should go where it belongs. We assign chores the way divorcing people assign property, except we weren't divorcing yet, and maybe that was the point. He takes the car payment on the 15th. I keep the dog during the week. He gets Sundays if he texts the time in the morning and arrives within 10 minutes. Test of it. We will make decisions about the ring after 6 sessions, not before. We will not rehearse cruelty. We will not audition for forgiveness. Friday evening, I walked past Pilar's whiteboard and saw she'd added one more small box in the corner. Returns. Under it, 2 names, Aisha and the engineer who had left last year. She drew a chair next to each name like a blessing. "We'll schedule pairings," she said. "Returning is a skill. People need maps." Willa, passing, added, "and chairs with back support," because the old ones in QE squeaked like gossip. Facilities replaced them by Monday with a kind that doesn't make you perform sitting. We closed the week with a 5-minute all-hands in the atrium. No podium, no projector, just voices. I said, "We moved 5 things, a cron, a seal, a line in the budget, a word on a wall, and 2 names back across our threshold. Next week we'll move 3 more. The old call box, a form in recruiting, and a rumor that still thinks it can pay rent." Here, Annika added, from the mezzanine. "Investors prefer boring. I prefer boring. Payroll prefers boring." Letty walked by and called, "Dishwasher prefers boring." And the floor laughed in the clean way buildings do when they have earned the right to be funny again. On the way out, Ava slid me an envelope. Inside, 21 index cards from employees who had attended Manager Basics. Each had one sentence written in block letters. "I will not ask for drinks to talk about performance. I will publish times. I will call Willa. I will rename family. I will not hum numbers. I will buy chairs before swag. I read each, put a paperclip around the stack and filed it in the ceramic keys dish, which has become our office's folder for promises that might otherwise slip under doors. At home, the basil plant needed pinching, and the cactus called procedural minded its own empire of spines. The blue bowl on the table held the ring, and beside it, a folded note I hadn't seen James write. I'll keep the calendar. It wasn't apology. It was a noun. I cooked soup that tastes like decision. Leeks, potatoes, a splash of cream like a white flag, and wrote the outline for Part 10 of this new kind of company. Publish the manager rubric. Host the first numbers teach-in for interns. Roll the next code amendment, passphrase in vendor onboarding. Draft the memo that says, we do not call ourselves a family. We earn being called a good place to work. When I turned off the kitchen light, I could hear the building breathe, the dishwasher asleep, the dog snoring, the city counting down to quiet hours. The elevator in my head no longer carried sofas. The lobby sign no longer invited performances. The call box said names the way they wanted to be said. The passphrase asked for sentences and got them. And the badge on my belt recognized me not as a wife with a +1, but as the person who keeps the calendar. Orientation day came on a bright Thursday that smelled like toner and lemon cleaner. HR had laid out name badges on a table that used to hold whiskey bottles for culture. Now it held pens that worked, a bowl of stipends for interview projects, and a stack of calendars that looked like trains about to arrive. We called it Day 1, not onboarding because Day 1 sounds like work that begins, not trivia you have to pass before you get to your desk. Willa stood at the door, headless table inside, chairs aligned. She greeted each new hire by name and offered the shortest sentence in corporate life that can make a person taller. We've been expecting you. Aisha took a seat near the front with a notebook that already had tabs. The returning engineer, Jules, sat next to QE, under a sign that no longer said family but did say quality engineering, chairs with backs that don't perform when you sit. Mohan handed out a one-page run book labeled Where to Stand When Things Break. Pilar taped actual, aspirational on the wall, but smaller because not everything needs to be a banner to be believed. Welcome, I said at 9 o'clock exactly. We will give you 3 things today: names, chairs, and times. I held up the code table of contents, the leveling guide page, the Tuesday schedule. You will not be surprised, I promised, which is a thing leaders don't say enough because they confuse surprise with charisma. If we surprise you, it will be because we are giving you a chair, not asking for a performance. We did the tour backwards, warehouse first, because most companies pretend warehouses are attics. Marcella met us with coffee and a forklift that does not squeak. She pointed to the recert certificates like proud laundry. Tests you can study for, she said, and the new hires smiled at the idea like it might be a holiday. Ava at the front desk practiced saying everyone's names, and the call box said them back correctly because someone had installed dignity in the circuit. We paused by tea, the lobby sign. Deliveries require a name and a sentence. A courier read it, laughed, and returned 5 minutes later with both. We walked past the 5th floor kitchen, where the dishwasher finished a cycle without announcing its feelings. Letty raised her cup from a stool she'd claimed not because it's hers, but because someone finally put a stool in a room that expects people to stand all day. Orientation day's better than after parties, she said, espresso bold. Back in the atrium, the jar sat on a small table. A mason jar with a label Willa, lettered in block print, family tax. The jar had become a ritual. Every time someone said family on a stage where it didn't belong, they put $1 in. The joke lasted exactly 1 week before it stopped being a joke. Today, James carried the jar like a person who had been taught to lift with his legs and his humility. He handed it to Ava, who had brought a tote bag printed with a cartoon chair, and to Letty, who had borrowed a hand truck like a C. Roan. We walked the jar to the city library together at noon. The branch manager greeted us with the kind of smile librarians save for donors whose checks are not performative. For chairs, Willa said, as if chairs were a genre of book. For chairs, the manager agreed, and for the copier that thinks it's a person. She gave us a receipt because libraries love receipts even more than we do. On the way out, we paused at the community board where someone had posted a flyer. Borrow a space, not a vibe. Free small business hours every Thursday. Jules pointed at it. That's better recruiting than whiskey, she said, and Pilar snorted like a mathematician. The insider trading investigation we tried not to narrate came and went like a winter storm that arrives in the night and wakes city workers early. Thorne sent paper on time. The Partners' Council sent updates that preferred numbered paragraphs to rhetoric. Regulators asked for logs and got logs. One afternoon, a letter arrived for Bragg and Derek and Colin from an agency with an acronym that makes executives sweat. The return addresses were not our address. I did not read the letters. Our job was the timeline and the rails. Other people's jobs were consequences. Beige allows justice to happen where it should happen. Quiet rooms with fluorescent lighting and plenty of staplers. And in the rooms that were ours, the company practiced being ordinary and found it exquisite. Tuesday, 3 p.m. Reports got so unsurprising that someone suggested we make them prettier. Pilar shook her head. We're not making a calendar that wants makeup, she said. We're making a calendar that keeps its promises. Elliot began to sign his updates with a tiny check mark next to the word neutral. The investors stopped calling and started forwarding interns to open books. Nate rebuilt recruiting like a bus schedule. He kept the clipboard and lost the wink. His apology letter to candidates improved each week until Willa told him to stop editing because SE humility that works learns to live at version 1.0. He kept $1 folded in his pocket for the jar he no longer needed. He taught a hiring manager to say add instead of fit, and to ask, what do you teach, instead of how much do you look like us? He moved out of HR's doorway and into its office. James did his training. He sent his certificates quietly. He asked fewer questions designed to start fights, and more designed to end confusion. He came to Tuesday 7 with his phone off and his posture unperformative. He said weather when he wanted to tell a story that would have shifted us back into old grooves, and then he shut his mouth and let something better happen. We moved through the list each time. Rent, car, counseling, dog, ring. And the ring remained in the bowl, which taught me a thing I should have learned earlier. Some nouns are verbs that need time to finish. On a Friday, Annika asked me for a favor that sounded like a reward. Come to the investor day, she said, and be Bo, ring on stage. She meant publish times, decline adjectives, Remind them that our company is not a metaphor. I stood at a lectern in a room that used to make me itch and told a row of people in suits. We replaced a cron with a service, a vibe with a code, and a poster with chairs. Someone asked whether this new culture would hurt growth. Culture isn't new, I said. It's just written down now. On the way out, a woman with a portfolio that could afford meaning tapped my elbow and said, "Thank you for not using Journey." Beige clapped under its breath. We hosted Careers Day for high school girls the week after orientation. The flip charts said, "Ladders, not vines," and the handouts had pictures of chairs and calendars. A tiny human with a bun too serious for her age asked me, "How do you become the boss if people think you're soft?" I told her the truth. You become the boss by writing it down and repeating it until it becomes furniture. She nodded the nod of a person who suspects furniture will be her preferred weapon. After, she wrote me a thank you note with the sentence, "I wish I'd had at 12. I'm going to be boring on purpose." Pilar launched Numbers Teach-In for interns on Wednesdays at 9:30. She started each session the same way, with a pie chart that isn't a pie chart, just a circle with 3 words around it: people, tools, process. Pick the smallest slice each week to fix, she said. Leave the heroics for fiction. She introduced a new stamp, Publish, next to the little check mark Sarah had found. Elliot used both on a printout, and I almost cried at a stamp. Aging has its surprises. QE published their first bug walk video with captions, clear steps, and no snark. It did numbers. Not viral numbers, useful ones. People stopped writing tickets that accused code of being lazy and started writing tickets that described behavior. The video ended with an honest ritual, a shot of the dishwasher finishing without sighing. Letty agreed to be in the outtake, only if she could say seal. She loves that word now. Twice. She did. It was television that made your bones denser. We adjusted the passphrase policy for vendors because Ava discovered a side effect. Couriers started trying to compliment her instead of presenting nouns. Willa added 2 sentences to the card. Compliments are for birthdays. Deliveries are for names. The compliments stopped in a week because scripts beat charm when you give them the right verbs. Friday afternoons acquired a custom. 5-minute wins in the atrium. No slides. Anyone could stand on the slightly raised platform and say one sentence about one thing they made better. Marcella. Forklift pedal fixed, cords above ankles. Dinesh. Certificates autopilot. Aisha. Approval gate live. Flags now need names. Jules. QE chairs don't squeak. Ava. Call box says so Cheadle right. Mohan. War room ran in 41 minutes again. We published. Letty. Dishwasher. Boring. We clapped like adults who had found the right T volume for competence. On the home front, Tuesday 7 began to feel like a room we built on purpose instead of a place we went because we were lost. The counselor asked us to do 7 sessions before deciding about the ring. We did 3, then 5. On the 6th, James said, "I want to stay married if the job description is clear." I said, "I want to be married if we both keep the calendar." We agreed to a 7th. We learned to break between topics like we learned to break between incident phases. We learned to end meetings on time. Sometimes love is a stopwatch and a green check. One night, my father texted me a picture of the neighbor kid sitting on his motorcycle at sunset, the engine at idle, The kickstand not down because balance had been achieved. Caption: he stopped calling it a bike and started calling it a machine he maintains. I stared at the sentence, then at my company, then at the blue bowl with the ring inside, then at the dog, loyal as gravity. And I felt a thing I had not expected to feel 9 parts ago. Not relief, not triumph, not even safety. Maintenance, the right to maintain. We weren't done. We would never be done. There would be more audits and outages and rumors that think they can rent a room here. There would be managers who relapse into family, candidates who ask to do free work, investors who prefer adjectives. There would be nights when I would want to be cinematic instead of present. But the company had bones. It had chairs. It had a jar that bought seats at a library where anyone can sit. It had a dishwasher that does not cry, and a front desk that asks for sentences. It had a war room with rules and a whiteboard with times, and a calendar that made promises we kept. The last thing I did on orientation day was the first thing I should have done a year earlier. I stood in the atrium with a stack of index cards and wrote down 3 sentences I wanted the building to learn, then taped them next to the elevator buttons, waist high, where eyes rest when fingers reach. Fear wants fast, procedures like slow. We don't call ourselves a family. We earn being called a good place to work. Totals must add, narrative cannot. People read them on their way to floors that now tell the truth about what they hold. And if someone forgot, that was okay. There were chairs in every conference room now, extra ones stacked. We could sit. We could ask. We could schedule. Beige had won, quietly. The building made a nice sound. 6 months after the week Beige won, the company felt like a machine we maintain. Aisha now runs the approval gate without flair and with perfect logs. Jules rebuilt QE's onboarding so new hires learn to say repro steps before vibe. Pilar's Tuesday 3 p.m. publishes have become the most boring appointment on our calendar, and the one nobody misses. Willa's family tax jar paid for 8 chairs at the neighborhood library. Ava keeps the receipt taped to her monitor like a medal. Marcella hung the forklift recert photo in the break room under a new sign. Ladders, not fines. Nate's apology letters moved from version 1.0 to muscle memory. He keeps a calendar that smiles back. The Partners' Council stopped calling. The regulator sent a polite, "Thank you for your cooperation." PR never had to invent color. Inside the building, the dishwasher remains blissfully uninteresting. The call box pronounces every name right. The lobby sign still asks vendors for a name and a sentence, and it works. Home Tuesday 7th kept its promise. We finished our 7th counseling session and agreed on the only rule that ever mattered. We keep the calendar, even when we don't keep each other. The ring stayed in the blue bowl, not a verdict, a noun. Well, the dog learned that Sunday pickups happen on time or not at all. My father, delighted by our love of schedules, texted a photo of the neighbor kid's motorcycle idling steady at a light. He captioned it, "Maintenance is love." I believed him. And if someone asks what changed, I tell them the truth. We stopped auditioning for safety. We chose chairs over weather. We wrote it down and then acted like we meant it.